a while. It feels like it's been a little while because in between then and now we had a holiday and we had Flame Fatale, which was an amazing event. So excited. We are once again supporting Malala Fund. I'm sure you all watched and enjoyed. And if you haven't, you should go back and see some of those runs. They were amazing. It was wonderful being a part of that. Anyway, hello. We are back with our Hot Fix show here. Great to have you back. I think I was going to say glad and great at the same time. I'm very good at speaking. This is why I'm a host, right? Anyway, tonight we have a really special, awesome episode that I've been excited to show off since SGDQ. We have two of the people who were very heavily involved in the making of this Zelda Ocarina of Time. Well, they said it was the beta showcase, but then it's turned into the Triforce %. So really, really excited. It's a little different from what we usually have on the show. Typically, you'll see somebody coming on and breaking down the glitches in glitch-heavy speed games. So it's, less about getting through the run at a PB pace, and more about, stopping and getting into the real nitty-gritty of how do these glitches work and how are they set up. So I thought that this is a really cool kind of related topic that I really wanted to give the platform to show off and give them more time to really break things down and talk to us about how they work. There's going to be a lot of numbers, a lot of slides and all kinds of things that you all are going to see tonight. So open up those brains, get ready to get them real wrinkly, and enjoy all the information we have this evening. So now to bring on the two guests, let's swap over and say hello to Dwango AC and Soren, who are here joining us tonight. How are the two of you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. How about you, Soren?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
We also have TAS behind me.
Yes, there's TAS looking super duper cute, of course. Very excited to have you both on. Look at the new design, so cute. Man, the badge always reminds me of Spike. It's so funny. So I just wanted to chat with you two for a moment and hear a little bit about what kind of got you involved. So Dwango, I'm going to start with you for a second. You've been working with TASBot for a long time. And for those of you who've watched the show, I love to ask a couple questions about our guests before we really get into the meat of the content. But I just wanted to ask kind of what got you involved in working on TAS and kind of showing that off?
So this is an interesting question for me because it goes back so many years. All the way back in 2003, I saw a video on the interwebs before the days of YouTube, if you can remember those, where Super Mario Brothers 3 was being shown, and Mario was doing the most insane things ever. He was jumping over impossible, doing impossible jumps, impossibly close to enemies, and I just had to know more about what was going on. So I got into what I then discovered was tool-assisted speedruns. At the beginning, it was NES Videos that was created to host videos like this, tool-assisted speedruns, and ultimately became tasvideos.org. I submitted my first tool-assisted speedrun in 2008, and in 2013, wow, I really wanted to do something for Awesome Games Done Quick. In particular, for me, I had this desire to do something for the Prevent Cancer Foundation at that particular time because my grandmother had passed away from cancer. I knew a close personal friend that had gone through cancer, and it just was a cause I really wanted to do something for. I tried learning how to speedrun myself. I attempted to do it with, of all things, Scribblenauts Unlimited. I was very bad at it. Realized, hey, wait a minute, there's all of these wonderful tool-assisted speedruns I'd love to be able to show, and someone had figured out how to do this on a real console. Someone named True had put together a way to do it on a real video game console, and I got really excited about this idea. I pitched it. A lot of people in the ICDA community were not too thrilled with that idea, but a few people took a chance, Mike Yama in particular, and here I am all these years later. We've now done... Oh, goodness. This is going to sound almost like a humble brag, but I've been doing events since AGDQ 2014. I've now done more runs than Mike. I did not expect it to be this way, but that's how it happened.
Yeah.
So we've now done, it must be 14 Games Done Quick events, and the charity portion raised from that out of donation incentives and whatnot for TASBot content is all the way over 1.3 million now. I can't believe it. It's just insane. So I've just been so happy with what we've been able to do. And now you can see we've taken it a long way. We have our brand new TASBot. He's super cute, and we have lots of fun things that we want to do with him in the years to come. So it's not over, folks.
Yes. Which is great. Yeah, it's awesome hearing about all of your history. Again, it's not only your history involved in TAS, but also working with GDQ. It seems like it's been a really wonderful partnership. So always great to hear about that. And now, because we want to chat with Soren as well. Soren, I know you're a little like newer to the stage, and you were involved in this past yeah, as GDQ with Triforce Percent. So sounds like you have more experience with kind of like the Zelda side of things. Can you tell us a little bit about like your like experience and expertise in like this category and like your work with this setup?
Yeah, so I'm not a speedrunner. This was my first GDQ, my first experience working with the TASBot community. It's been great, but I was I'm an engineer. I've been doing interesting I think they're interesting game tech related projects for many years, and I'm also a musician, and I've been doing music arranging for many years. And back in 2014, I had made a MIDI of an arrangement of some game music. I don't even remember what it was. And I saw a YouTube video where someone had taken my MIDI and imported it into Super Mario 64 and had it playing in the Mario 64 engine. And that got me started on, there were some issues with the import. The tools were kind of basic at that time. I got started with writing a music editor tool for first-party N64 games.
Oh, wow.
So there's a special music file format, and I worked on that. And that's what I started that in 2014. Between then and late 2019, which is when Triforce Percent started, I had never made a ROM hack. I had never done any kind of anything like this, basically. But I grew up with Ocarina of Time. I always wanted to see the more to this. There was always rumors, and there was always more to the game than met the eye. Some things that you could see with Game Shark, some things that people could found when they rip the game apart. And I was always fascinated by all of that. And I knew about the urban legends. Wanted to get the Triforce. Once I knew about ACE, arbitrary code execution, which we'll be talking about. Once I knew about that existing in other games, and then it was found in Pokemon Stadium on N64, then I was like, oh, well, I hope that someday they'll find arbitrary code execution in Ocarina of Time so that we can use arbitrary code execution to get the Triforce in Ocarina of Time. And so the ACE exploit was found in November 2019. And within a week, I started a development Discord and a GitHub repo and started putting together proof of concept.
Wow.
I recruited Dwango onto the project at MagFest 2020, and he gave me a chance. I was a completely unproven person. He gave me a chance and joined as the executive producer. And then 2.5 years later, we presented at Summer Games Done Quick and raised $227,000 for Doctors Without Borders.
That's amazing.
I think it's $228,000 now, but yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. It's just really cool to hear about your whole process leading up to that. Like you say, I know you're not a speedrunner or whatever, but your involvement in the TAS community, I mean, I'm sure it can be, obviously people are going to be like, oh, yes, like I can definitely, know this person now, but it's really cool to hear about your writing the custom music thing for N64 games. I feel like a lot of people in the N64 modding community have definitely taken advantage of that kind of tool and are probably very, very grateful for it.
So not to toot my own horn, but every Mario 64 or Ocarina of Time ROM hack made since 2015 or so has used my music software.
That's really, really cool. Okay, that's very awesome to hear. And then I love seeing your work together again in this Triforce Percent. This is what we're going to be seeing in just a moment here. Taking several years to get this done. It's wild. So very excited to see it really, really broken down here. Feel free to nerd out, you two. As we get started, anybody in chat, if you have questions as we go along, feel free to post. I'm happy to jump in whenever it seems like there's a good moment and relay those questions to the two presenting today. But this is going to be a bit more of a backseated experience for me, I think. I'll just be... I'm really just here to watch and listen. I mean, that's normal, but I feel like it'll be even more... you'll hear a little less of me than usual, I'm sure, because this will be really cool to just hear about. So whenever you two are ready, feel free to I'm gonna, since Soren was the last one to answer, Dwango, I'm gonna let you do just a countdown, and then we can start the timer, which it's just to keep track of how far the show is going. We don't really do estimates on the show anyway, because you know.
Yeah, I wouldn't bother.
We're not about the actual.
It's going to be a complete. Yeah.
The show is going to be what it is tonight. It's going to be great. But yeah, feel free to do a countdown, and then we can get started.
All right, in 3, 2, 1, go. So once again, I am Dwango AC, keeper of TASBot, and I'm actually going to be using a video made by Retro Game Mechanics Explained. You can find this over on IsoFreeze's channel RGME, Retro Game Mechanics Explained, on YouTube. This video is used with permission. The Retro Game Mechanics Explained creator, IsoFreeze, was one of our partner creators throughout the course of this process and made amazing explanation videos, or an amazing explanation video about what we did for Zelda Triforce Percent Explained. So we're going to get right into this. Before I go on, there is some things I need to talk about. First of all, this was a very large project. Soren and I are representing a huge community of folks that put a lot of effort into it. I would say, just as a quick pause, that Soren was easily 2/3 of the project, right there, just out of the gate. So as our director, Soren was actively involved in all the various different aspects. Soren asked me to come on as the executive producer. It was the first time I'd filled that specific role in that title, and it turned out that I'd actually done a lot of the same things already on other projects without realizing it. So I had to learn quite a lot of things about how this was all put together, but I am not necessarily the expert. So we're going to have some fun with this and talk about how you actually take over a Nintendo 64 using only button presses on controllers and do things that are akin to magic. And honestly, any sufficiently advanced technology is completely indistinguishable from magic, and this is no exception. We are going to pull the curtain back and show you how we did what we did, starting with how we did the initial intro. I'm going to pause here and ask Soren if he has anything he wants to talk about before we get started on this part of it.
Yeah, I think we should just give a little bit of a high-level overview of what Triforce Percent is for those of you who have not seen the GDQ run. It is up on Dwango AC's channel, the TASBot channel, and also on the GDQ channel. You can see it either place. Basically, and we will explain more in detail, very much detail, what arbitrary code execution is. But basically, it is a set of exploits that allows the player of a game to take control of the game, take control of the console, and make whatever they want, whatever they can develop and program and inject happen within the game. And it's very important we're not modifying the ROM in advance. We didn't modify the cartridge. The console is unmodified other than an RGB mod, which we use to get a clean video signal, but that doesn't affect any of the gameplay. So it's really, you're sitting down with the vanilla game, the console, you press buttons really fast, or rather TASBot presses buttons really fast, and things start changing in the game. And so we did this at GDQ. We did this under the guise of beta showcase, and it's not entirely false. We were showing a bunch of beta content, some content that was left on the cartridge, left on the cutting room floor, other content which Nintendo had actually made way back in the day, but wasn't left on the cartridge, and our team recreated it. And then there's some content that we completely made up in order to string things together and make a nice plot. But basically, we started the game, we did this ACE exploit, TASBot took over, dumped a bunch of data into the console's memory, and then the contents of the game started being different. And it was basically an alternate plot, a new quest that we went on for about an hour, culminating in getting the Triforce, and then some other finale things, which you'll get to see here at the end. But yeah, that's what the project was. We showed some beta content, but we also put the beta content together into a coherent story, basically a made-up fan story that then, led to these urban legends coming true and people's dreams about the game being realized.
Yeah, that's...
Any overall points I missed there,
That
Dwango?
is a good summary. Okay, so there's one thing to talk about, which is what exactly is this arbitrary ACE, arbitrary code execution, in the context of what we did. Now, ACE is actually a category you'll see, and even on the Nintendo 64 Ocarina of Time leaderboards, you will see any percent includes stale reference manipulation ACE. Now, we're going to get into more of what those words mean in a second, But the biggest aspect of this is arbitrary code execution means exactly what you think it means. It means arbitrary. It means you can do anything. And most of the time in speedrunning contexts, that means jumping to the end credits as fast as possible, or getting to a condition that the community agrees for that game is the win condition. Now, a lot of what we're going to show you is going to apply to the N64 OOT any percent ACE category. In other words, what you're about to see isn't necessarily specific to us for the most part. It will diverge a little bit at the end, and we'll cover that point a little bit. But don't assume that what we're telling you is just TASBot. This is largely at the beginning going to be something that a human runner can and will do. And actually, it might be a good time really quick to pause and talk about save state's role and what they had to do as at a high level. Do you want to tackle that, Soren?
Well, I also have a quick question, if that's okay.
Sure.
I was seeing a few people in chat mentioning things about like wondering if there's any kind of like version restrictions on the cartridge for this like specific showcase.
Yeah. So the version that we compiled will work on 1.0 American version only.
Okay.
We can make a couple of changes to the patches that we used for the text system, because we patched, we did custom text, we did a lot of patches throughout. And if we wanted that to support Japanese text and patching Japanese text, we would have had to make a minor change there. Then it could have worked with 1.0 Japanese.
Okay.
If we had rebuilt everything with different addresses in the code, it might, if you're not a programmer, this might not make a lot of sense, but basically, you basically change a database that has all of locations of where everything is in memory. If we change that out, this could work on any N64 version of Ocarina of Time. But these strategies do not work on the GameCube versions, Virtual Console versions, or anything like that because of the way that those are all emulated. And the way that those emulators work, basically they won't work with the way that we're doing arbitrary code.
Sure. Okay, awesome. Thanks. Okay, go ahead with your next point.
Yeah, so Save State is a human speedrunner. They are a current world record holder in one of the categories of Ocarina of Time speedrunning. I don't remember which one it is. And they're former world record in several other categories. So, normally you see a speedrun, it's either an RTA speedrun by a human. Real RTA is real-time attack. A normal speedrun being played by a normal human, or it's a TAS. So it's either a TAS being played on the computer or being played on the real console by TASBot. But for Triforce%, we need both a human speedrunner and TASBot. The first however many minutes of this explanation video that you see of doing the ACE setup has to be done by a human. It cannot be done by TASBot.
Trust us, we tried.
And the reason is that, yeah, we tried. The reason is that Ocarina of Time has a couple of different things about how it works, and I won't get into too much technical detail, but basically the timing of lag frames is random and can be potentially dependent on the RNG. And the RNG is dependent on the CPU cycle counter. And so if you want to do a TAS on an emulator, you need it to be cycle accurate. Because otherwise the cycle counter will be different, then the RNG will be different, and then what happens in the game will be different. And that also means that the timing of the lag frames will be different. And on top of just having the CPU emulation be cycle accurate, the CPU has to wait for basically the GPU, the RSP and RDP in the N64 to finish doing operations. And it waits for that. And so the amount of time it waits depends on how long that takes to operate. So you have to have a cycle accurate emulator for the graphics. And the amount of time it takes to do that depends on how long the memory takes to respond to transactions. So you actually have to have a cycle accurate emulator of the entire system in order to have any chance at this. And that does not exist yet. There are some emulators that are in development that are sort of getting there, but it doesn't exist yet. And even if you have all of that, inside the console, there's actually two different clock chips. They're actually separate quartz crystals. And those two clocks can drift relative to each other. And normally they probably don't drift by very much. And we're not sure if over 10 or 15 minute speedrun, if they would drift enough to make a problem for desyncs. But theoretically, they will drift. And so theoretically, that is an effect that you cannot model with an emulator because the amount that they drift depends on the local heating inside the console and everything. So basically, for timing reasons, you make a TAS, you play it back on the console, it will do a different thing every time. And that's, TAS, we need it to be exactly the same thing every time. So we tried, can't do it. So we need a human to actually be playing, actually watching what's happening on screen and responding to it. So that's why we got Save State to, do the whole
Yeah,
setup.
we needed them. And by the way, this isn't a problem that's unique to the Nintendo 64. I have here they very, very yellowed Super Nintendo. The Super Nintendo has the same problem. It has a main CPU clock that runs at 21 megahertz and a audio processing unit, an APU, that runs at 24.576 megahertz. The CPU clock is a proper quartz crystal. The APU, the audio portion, is a ceramic oscillator. It changes over time, it changes over temperature, and the specification that was given to the developer that said, hey, it runs at 24.576, isn't actually how the hardware works, especially 20 plus, almost 30 years on for the Super Nintendo's case. So even if you had everything right, you might still be dealing with components that are not matching what the original software developer was told about how the system would perform, how fast it would be. But yeah, in the case of specifically Ocarina of Time, we did a lot of testing, and it's the simple things like the Kokiri Forest has those little moats that are floating around. Well, each one of those is random, and it introduces different behavior. So we cannot get deterministic results out of replay devices or TASBot. I need to touch on that really quickly, and then we'll move on to the actual explanation that we intended to get to. TASBot is pretty much a player piano. If you've ever seen a player piano with a piano roll, it's nothing more and nothing less than a pre-composed song that's played back as a sequence of notes in order. And a tool-assisted speedrun is the same thing. Just like how a musician would compose a song in advance and then play it back after the fact, we're doing the same thing with a tool-assisted speedrun. We're making the run in an emulator in most cases. This particular run we're about to describe to you, Ocarina of Time, ACE Showcase, or Beta Showcase as we called it, is a little different. But most of the time, a tool-assisted speedrun is made in an emulator in advance. You can think of it just like composing a song. And after the fact, we take the full, what we call a movie file, and instead of playing back a series of notes on a player piano, we're playing back a sequence of button presses on a console. So normally, when we're doing tool-assisted speedruns with TASBot on, say, the Super Nintendo, we'll connect TASBot to a replay device. He has this one here. Yes, I have to hand it to him. This is Onosaurus's, let me get this the right orientation. This is Onosaurus's TAS TM32. This is an older revision. This is what we put in TASBot's hands when he is connected to a real video game console. It pretends to be a controller. You power on the console. It sends a sequence of button presses and beats the game. So TAS tool-assisted speedrun is a process made in an emulator. Console verification, what we do with TASBot with a replay device, is a completely separate process that you can think of as a performance of that art, as it were. It's like a transformative art. So I said a whole lot of stuff. I'm fairly certain Soren probably has a couple of comments as well. And maybe even Fu has some comments.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, while most TASs are made in an emulator by somebody sort of single-stepping and entering the inputs that they want, and every single frame, looking at memory, going back in time, redoing things, that kind of process. Triforce% was not made like that at all. All of the inputs that TASBot is making were created, were composed, to use the musical metaphor, by scripts, which myself and the rest of the team wrote. So we wrote programs to generate, to basically turn the custom data and stuff we wanted to do into controller input that then get fed into TASBot and connect to the game and do things in the game. So let's get into this video.
Yeah, I'm ready. Anything else from you, Fu?
I've just been listening along, honestly, and I'm ready to hear more. I haven't seen any questions that I think would be nothing else to ask at the moment. Chat's always really good in these kinds of shows to help kind of respond to each other and follow up if they have questions before I can often get to the runners.
Awesome.
If there is anything, again, I will find jumping points in, but I'm really leaving this content to you all.
Awesome. Okay, so what we're going to get started on now is talking about how Save State was able to do what they did. And this will also apply, this next section will also apply to the any percent of the OOT N64 speedruns that you'll see. So I'm going to jump way ahead here. We're going to go through. Now, this is the actual raw video from Retro Game Mechanics Explains channel. So you'll see references to video, and that's totally fine here in the lower right corner. What I'm going to talk about, though, is what it takes to effectively interpret all these buttons as code. And first, we got to talk about how the controller works. This is kind of crazy stuff. So, first of all, the button presses for the controllers are stored at memory address 8011D790. There's 1 byte for ABZS up, down, left, right. 1 byte for LR up, down, left, right, and then X and Y each take a byte. There's a byte for error codes, things like the controller not plugged in, and another byte for padding. And altogether, this makes up a total of 24 bytes. So by pressing buttons and moving around the control stick on the controllers, the values in these memory addresses change. Now, under normal circumstances, the game's code can read these values and know what the player is currently pressing and update those, update that in the game normally. But the area of memory that this is stored in is just like any other area of memory. You can execute code, you can store data, it doesn't matter. The Nintendo 64 is definitely not memory safe. Anything you want to add to that section before we move on? I'll pause here for a sec. Okay.
Nope, that's a modern system has protection so that the same region of memory you can't directly write data to and then also execute. But the N64 is actually kind of modern in some ways, but in this matter, it's not set up that way. All of the memory can be written or executed, and so that's exactly what we're going to be doing.
Yeah, and as you can see here, the memory address for the controllers can be treated as code, but it will greatly depend on what buttons and angle of the controller sticks are held to define what happens. And most of the time it might be completely garbage data, but you can, if you hit the buttons in just the right order, you can do valid instructions here. It is possible. So obviously the game developers never intended you to be executing code. So I'm going to pause here for a second. They never expected you to be running code from the controller ports. This was never anything that they planned on happening. And it gets kind of weird. Let me actually bump
just to jump in here. So, interpreting, there's 2 steps to any arbitrary code execution exploit. There is setting up the code you want to run to be in memory somewhere, and then there is getting the game to then execute that code. So when we're talking about pressing buttons in the controller and having the memory, manipulating what's in that memory, that's changing the memory that's holding the state of the controllers to being whatever we want it to be based on. It's not entirely whatever we want. There's some restrictions on it, but for the most part, you can press buttons however you want. You can have that memory be whatever you want. That by itself doesn't get arbitrary code execution. Most of the setup is actually to try to get the game to actually jump execution to that memory that is the controllers. That's the hard part. Well, yeah. in each game, each of those 2 halves may be the hard part. But in this case, that's the hard part.
Yeah. Now, we're going to get to a conversation on what stale reference manipulation is. And stale reference manipulation is the term used inside of the community, but a better word for it from more of a, say, security perspective is a use after free exploit is really what this is. So we'll refer to it as stale reference manipulation or SRM for short, to keep with the nomenclature that you'll see used in the Ocarina of Time N64 any percent runs that use SRM glitches, but it is a use after free exploit. So we need to talk a little bit about the heap. So there's some fun things about the heap. So first of all, a heap is basically an area of dynamically allocated memory where data blocks of different sizes are reserved for use by various objects and functions. And in Ocarina of Time, there's a very specific heap called the actor heap, which contains all the data for the actors that are currently loaded in the game. That can be pretty much anything, whether it's Link himself, rupees, or even some hidden objects. And there are
actors kind of like just any item, object, or character?
Pretty much.
An actor is anything in the scene that has a behavior.
Okay,
So,
great.
like a wall is not an actor, but a bush that you can cut, or a rupee that you can collect is an actor. And just to add to what Dwango said, the actor heap importantly doesn't just store the data for the actors; it also stores the code for the actors. That's exactly how we're going to be doing all of this. When you go through loading zone, it will load the code and the data, and the data is holding the current state of the actor. Let's say it's variables saying where it is, what it's doing, and then the code is fixed normally until we come along. It's completely fixed, never changes, and those are both on the actor heap. And so when we go through a loading zone, or when we let's say we collect that rupee, it will disappear from the actor heap, or at least its data allocation will. When we go through a loading zone that isn't changing to a new scene, but just a new room within the same scene, the new actors will load into the actor heap, starting from where the old actors were. So it'll load the new actors, and then it'll get rid of the old actors. And so every time you go back and forth across the loading zone, it'll reshuffle where things are in memory. So, and by picking things up, that'll also remove things from the heap, which will also shuffle later where things were later in memory. So the first set of actions that we're doing through the setup seem like randomly collecting rupees and things, but that's actually manipulating the actor heap so that we can get a particular alignment between where one item was at one time and then where another item is going to load in.
So if that sounds a little overwhelming, don't worry. We have pictures to make it even more overwhelming. I don't mean that literally. We'll try to make this make a little bit more sense with some animations. Again, huge credit to IsoFreeze. Their animation, or his animation capabilities, are astoundingly good. So you'll see that here in a second. By the way, the animations you're about to see in a little bit are the actual data from the heap. He had a tool to extract it from memory and interpret it in his animation software. It was really kind of cool. So there's some behind the scenes stuff for you. Okay, so let's talk about this actor heap. There's something interesting about what's going on here. You have both actors and actor overlays, because you don't want to necessarily have to duplicate the behavior of certain actors. So there will be the actors themselves, and they'll have an individual instance, but you'll have an actor overlay that will have metadata about, or have data about all of the actors of that type. So Rupee,
the overlay is the code.
Yeah, the overlay is the code, and then there's individual instances effectively. Is that a good way to phrase it?
Yeah. So the reason it's called an overlay is because where that code gets allocated into memory is not at a fixed location. It gets overlaid basically into the heap. And when the game loads it, it actually has to fix all the addresses in the code in order to actually allow it to work. But yes, you have one instance of an overlay for a particular object, and then multiple instances of the actual data for holding the state of those different instances of the actor.
Yeah. Now, this is going to get kind of interesting, because when you leave an area and come back, they have to be reallocated. So you'll end up in a situation where they move around. So if you need to load a new object, it will search for a free area of memory from the beginning of the heap, and then drop it wherever it happens to find a free spot, and repeat over and over again, starting from the beginning up at 801DAA00 all the way to the bottom there. And actors and overlays are just randomly assigned in memory wherever. So if you leave an area, some actors are going to
Well, they're not random. That's the important part, is they're deterministic.
Well, they aren't random. They are not random. They are, in fact, deterministic. But they are deterministic in the sense that player input, if it's always consistent, will always result in the same outcome.
Right.
But you cannot guarantee from the outside where they will be unless you fully control the system in that way. Is that a better way of phrasing it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. Normally they would be random. We make them not random. That's part of the joy of it.
And
so
if you're watching this and you're wondering, well, how did anybody figure any of this out in the first place? Two answers. One, this was found in 2019. The game came out in 1998. That was 21 years. So people were working on this for 21 years before they found this exploit. And then the second thing is that people use emulators, and people will also use GZ, which is a mod for Ocarina of Time that gives you memory editor, save states, all kinds of speedrunning and tech tools. So you can actually do your actions and then look at the heap and see what it looks like, see where everything is, do more actions, make sure you did it right. We didn't use that during the live performance, of course. It was on a real, original cartridge, but you can practice, and Save State did practice very much with GZ, with, a bunch of memory watches and stuff, just to make sure everything was, that they were learning it right. So then they can go on the, without the crutches and do it right.
Yeah. Oh, man, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. As Soren pointed out, this is years of effort that went into getting to this point. And every time we kind of started going backward to see who we needed to give credit to for all of this, we couldn't really figure out a place to stop. Like, we just kept going back in history farther and farther, and there was always more people to credit. So, yeah. Okay, so the next part to talk about is, all right, we've left an area. Now we're going to come back in. And this results in actors and overlays being assigned new memory areas, or new memory locations that might not be where they were before. And if you can somehow get it to point to where an old actor was, for instance, you can end up with a stale reference. That's kind of a lame way of phrasing it. I'll try to explain this better.
The stale reference doesn't come about as a result of the shuffling. The shuffling, we need to do the shuffling so that when we have the stale reference, what the staleness, what it points to is the right thing. But that doesn't itself get us the stale reference. So that is another part of the setup, is to get the stale reference.
Yeah, and one of the things here that you'll see is some actors, kind of like this boomerang, need to have a pointer or a reference to another actor in their data. So a good example of this is that the boomerang actor keeps a reference to, say, the rupee. The rupee is just an actor, but it's keeping a reference to that rupee that it's grabbed. And under normal circumstances, if an actor references another actor, like this rupee here, the second actor shouldn't unload or be freed from the heap before the first actor either unreferences it or it unloads itself. If you don't do that, you end up with a stale reference. So, in other words, the pointer that this actor is now pointing to is a memory location that's not being used anymore. Get bumped up here a little bit. So, that's no longer in use. It's now a stale reference.
So, in the boomerang case, the boomerang has grabbed the rupee, flying back towards Link. If we somehow get the rupee to unload at that time, the boomerang doesn't know that. The boomerang is still writing to that pointer, and at that address, it's writing in the updated position. If we get a chest to load in that same position, all of a sudden the chest will come hurtling back on the boomerang to us, because the boomerang's code is just overwriting whatever is at the other end of that pointer, which happens to be now the chest's position.
By the way, if it's okay if none of this first portion makes sense, we will get to more of the fun stuff in a little bit. Don't worry. So just hang in there. If this is completely incomprehensible geek speak, we have more surprises for you that are not nearly this deep. This is going to be the most complex portion of what we're presenting today. So
and that's okay. I mean, this is all part of it, and like part of why we wanted this on the show is to have this reference for people who do want this kind of information and this like in-depth look. And like the overall ideas of what you're saying, like so far are making sense. It's just a lot. I mean, all of the additional language that comes with it can obviously seem like complex for those who aren't behind the scenes working on it and looking at it all the time. But, when you include an image, like, you do the boomerang and then swapping this out will then bring the chest back to you. Like, that's a really good way to, like, provide a visual. So there are definitely things that I'm sure are sticking with everybody here. But it's a lot to learn about, so.
Yeah, no kidding. And bear with us. We'll get to you. Don't worry. All right. So let's talk a little bit about this boomerang here. So we talked about that chest example where you can grab a rupee, but then make it grab something completely different, like just a totally different object. So, all right, let's talk about this rupee here. So, if a boomerang were to grab a rupee, it would specifically work with offsets 2.4, 2.8, and 2C within the allocated memory of the heap. You'll see that animated here on the screen here. And each one of those is the X, Y, and Z coordinates of the actor it's holding. But if you have a stale reference that's now pointing to an actor overlay instead of a normal actor, what you're ending up changing is blocks of code, right? You're literally just writing 32-bit float data into places where 32-bit MIPS assembly instructions are supposed to be held. So if you manage to get the code for this overlay to execute after the boomerang modifies it, it will likely just crash, because in most cases, it's probably not going to be sane code. So let's kind of walk over that a little bit. If you can control exactly what values are being written by the actor and exactly what instructions, you could modify the code that the game executes. So at that point, you can execute arbitrary code. That's what we're trying to do here is ultimately we're trying to execute arbitrary code. And
at this point, just by the way, at this point, that arbitrary code would be 3 instructions for what the example that's on screen, and probably those are going to crash. So there is a big difference between running 1 or 2 arbitrary instructions that the user wrote and then taking total control of the game and, injecting custom cutscenes where Link gets the Triforce. So, just to give the idea that arbitrary code execution means even just executing one single instruction written by the player. But then, of course, we're going to use that. We get one little foothold in, we use that to take over the whole game, which is another, fun part of the whole process.
All right, so what I'm going to do now is have Soren talk over this portion. He's going to do a better job of explaining what save state did. This is a video of the beginning portion that we would normally have a human do. Unfortunately, neither Soren or I are good enough at the game to do this for you live. So we're doing the video portion, but trust me, it's worth it. So
there'll be some live stuff later. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, don't worry. We're going to get the live stuff. Okay,
yeah,
so here's this.
We talked about the heap manipulation. By the time that you're seeing this video, the heap manipulation was already done. Link has just picked up a rock. Link has a pointer to the rock. Link is walking way off screen through a loading zone. When he goes through the loading zone, the rock unloads. And then when he goes back through the loading zone, the code for another actor will load into that same location in memory. And I should just mention that it's because of a bunch of glitches that allowed save state to lock the camera that we were able to have the rock unload when Link goes through the loading zone off screen. That's not a normal thing. You can carry objects through loading zones. It's because of other glitches. So, how many glitches were here? Well, there's multiple glitches that are used to lock the camera. Then there's the heap manipulation, which is not itself a glitch. Then there is the use after free, which is by itself, well, it's a bug, but it's a bug that would never be encountered in normal gameplay because Link never can get that far away from the camera. But because of the glitches which lock the camera, then you can do that. So, what parts of this are glitches? Well, it's, there are glitches that you use to get this, but it's not quite as straightforward as you do one glitch and then you get arbitrary code execution.
Yeah. So this next part, you're seeing actual live memory at the top of the screen here. So what I'm going to have Soren do is talk through this going back and forth across the loading zone and explain what's happening. So what you're seeing at the bottom is...
go ahead.
Yeah, what you're seeing at the bottom is the normal view of Link in the lower left that you would ordinarily see. On the right, you're seeing an overhead view, so you can see exactly what's happening from the top down. And then at the top is the heap, and it'll show you what objects are being loaded and unloaded in memory as this goes by.
Yeah, so there's not much that I will actually be able to say. You can start the video. There's not much that I'll actually be able to say about what's happening specifically. You'll see, collects that rupee, the rupee gets unloaded from the heap. When Link goes across the loading zone, you will see big changes as lots of things get loaded and unloaded. And it's just the idea of we want to shuffle this around in a specific order, that each of these operations, and if you are asking, well, how did anybody ever figure out the correct sequence of operations? There's actually scripts. Mr. Cheese and Save State together worked on this. There are scripts that you can use to come up with a set of actions. They will check all possible, combinations of actions and things like that in order to align specific things. So basically, we need that when we pick up the rock, and it hasn't even happened yet. This is part of setting up locking the camera. We want that when we pick up the rock, there's a pointer to somewhere into the rock's data, or that it's a pointer to the beginning of the rock's data, which is then referenced somewhere into it to adjust its position. We want that to line up in memory with where the wonder item gets loaded. This is the rock, it's being highlighted there, and we want the whole point of the heap manipulation is that when the rock unloads and the wonder item loads back in, and I will mention in a moment what the wonder item is, that those two addresses align correctly. So the wonder item is basically invisible rupees. That's the short explanation. There's a bunch of places throughout Hyrule. You go somewhere, you do some jump or whatever, you get an invisible rupee. That's the code for that is what we're overwriting.
Yeah, so, and this is continuing on to show the rotation info. I'll keep going.
Yeah, so you'll see the pointer from the link data to the rocks data. And actually, we're not using the positions, we're using the rotation. The positions are floating point numbers, and those are harder to deal with this. The rotation is 2 bytes. It's a signed short S16 if you're a programmer. And that we're going to be setting. So, we set this up so that we can overwrite half of one instruction in the wonder items code with a new rotation value. And then, of course, we have to set up an exact rotation value also, which will happen in a moment. So right now there's nothing loaded. Now the wonder item is loaded. The code is overwriting now, every frame, overwriting the rotation of what was the rotation of the rock, now overwriting part of the code for the wonder item. And it's overwriting that instruction. It'll pop up here on screen.
Yeah, I'll get there.
So it's a branch. It's the target of a branch. And we can change, that means when the code gets to there, it will go somewhere else depending on some condition. And so we're overwriting where it goes. So when it runs that code, it will then go somewhere else under our control. But that doesn't give us enough control to reach anywhere in memory. So we actually have to have that jump somewhere else that we can manipulate. So then we can go from there to jump somewhere else.
Yeah, I'll take the next section. So we can jump forward or backward 32,767 instructions. So this is kind of a little bit, we're going to get into some math here, but don't worry about it. So we can replace these with a lot of different values, but we still only have 32,767 instructions forward or backward. So the farthest back we can go as soon as we get here in the video. Okay, that means we can go as far back as 801F73C4 and as far forward as 802173C4. But we actually need to get, I'm sorry, I said that first address incorrectly. I apologize. We are at F73C4. We can go as far backward as D73C8 or as far forward as 2173C4. But where we want to go, where the instruction we want to jump to is at 8011D790. And there's a problem because that is beyond where we need to jump. It is outside of the range that we can get to. So instead, we will have to do our jump in 2 stages. So let me see if we can get to the part of the video where we talk about that. Okay.
So just to recap here, we use the heap manipulation to get these 2 pieces of data to line up, which normally you wouldn't care about, but we care about. We lock the camera, use glitches to lock the camera. We use that to get the rock to despawn, and because of the heap manipulation, the wonder item to spawn instead. And that allows us to overwrite half of one instruction in the wonder item's code. Then when we, using gameplay actions, get the wonder item to be on screen, this code will run. It will run into that instruction. It will take our branch, and it will branch somewhere in memory under our control. And so the next step is change that to be somewhere, we have to have a target that we can jump to. So that's the next piece here.
Yeah, and this part's going to get kind of fun. So we need to do a branch instruction. There's some disadvantages of branch instructions, though. Yeah, there's several. We have we have some limitations. Let me try to get caught up in my own notes here. So the main disadvantage of a branch instruction is that we only have 16 bits to work with, but a a jump instruction dedicates 26 bits to the jump address, which is enough to get us to the controller data. So we need to locate another 32 bits in the heap that we can manipulate, and fortunately, we have that in the form of the actor data for Link himself, his own rotation data in particular. So
his own rotation and the rotation that he was last at when he was Z-targeting.
Exactly. Yeah. Now that gives us exactly what we need. So what we need to do is get Link's angle to be very, very precise. And the whole rest of the setup is going to be figuring out ways to do exactly that. How do you get his angle to be perfect? So I'm going to let Soren talk about this part.
Yeah, so again, it's a, made with a script, a series of actions for Link to do that are repeatable by a human speedrunner that will each move Link's angle by an exact amount. Because we need those two angles to encode an exact value, which then becomes a jump instruction to the memory that has the controller data in it. This is buffering a turn, which means we're doing basically a frame perfect trick by having the camera by pausing and doing one frame at a time between the pauses. So now that Link's angle is correct, when we allow the camera to rotate, the wonder item will go on screen. Even though it's invisible, it still runs code because it's on screen. That will run into the code that we modified. That will be a jump instruction. That will jump to Link's angle. Link's angles, the rotations encode... that was a branch instruction going to Link's angle. Link's angles encode a jump instruction, which jump to the memory holding the controllers. And then the game will jump to the controllers and start executing, well, at that moment, it'll execute whatever the controllers or whatever all the buttons are as code. And in order for the game to not crash, first of all, we have to, I'll stop there because that's the next piece.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy. So, all right, at that point, save state steps away from the controller. They pass controller data over to, or they pass the controller one over to TASBot, and TASBot starts sending a whole mess of data which you're seeing flying by on screen. It's a lot of nutty stuff. So what inputs is TASBot actually sending? There's actually quite a lot, and the initial payloads take 1,136 frames of input to inject. It's a lot. So it starts with multiple layers.
It's about
of
15 seconds.
Yeah, it takes about 15 seconds. So Bootstrapper 1 injects a program, which injects a program, which after it gets done, injects a program, which injects a program, which eventually gets
we'll
us to
explain more of how this works. But this is, you can think of this as, two metaphors. One of them, the one, I thought of is we get a little crack in the fabric of reality. And so we hammer a wedge into that and make the crack wider and wider until we have full control over everything. The other metaphor somebody else came up with was you have a genie. The genie gives you one wish. So what do you wish for? You wish for more wishes. And that is exactly what we're doing here.
like
Bootstrapper 1. Here. Sorry?
So I like the metaphors here. Those are easy to relate to, for sure.
Yeah. So, we will explain in more detail what these are doing, but basically, as soon as we can execute controller data as code, we have to make sure the game doesn't crash, but then we get a small foothold that we can start doing things. And what we start doing is writing programs into memory and executing them. And then those programs let us have progressively more and more control over the game. We're not erasing Ocarina of Time's engine and just running our own game from scratch. We're we'll explain what we're doing eventually with all of this. But the goal of this whole process with these bootstrappers is to set up a way for us to be able to inject data into the console's memory at a reasonably fast rate. It ends up being about the speed of a dial-up connection by a TASBot mashing those buttons really fast. This set of bootstrappers is how we go from just that one instruction to inject a dial-up connection through the controller ports.
It's a lot. Okay, Fu, are there any questions that we should address now? I know that we just covered a whole lot. This brings us to the point of, save state played through, positioned a rock and positioned Link's angle, and did some other various things to get to the point where we we're able to trigger this initial foothold. The next part is going to be talking about the craziness that we did with TASBot connected to all 4 controller ports, and then at a certain point we're going to only be using ports 2 through 4 with TASBot. But this is probably a good time to pause and say, hey, what questions came in from chat that we possibly glossed over or didn't see?
Well, we're not quite at break time officially, but we do have somebody wondering if you need the expansion pack for this or no?
Absolutely.
Yes. So
Yes.
we use the expansion pack heavily because we wanted to inject lots and lots of data for, crazy finale scene and other things. And so, the N64, if you're not familiar, it has 4 megabytes of RAM internally, and then it has a slot on the top where you can add, that you can see right there, you can add an expansion pack, which adds an extra 4 megabytes. Some games use it, Ocarina of Time does not use it, so it's just 4 megabytes of memory sitting there, available for us to do with whatever we want. And this is RAM, that turns off, all the contents go away when you shut off the power. So this is once we do this setup, once we do the bootstrappers and we start loading data into the game, we're putting the data onto the expansion pack. So that's the answer, is that yes, we used it extensively. However, the expansion pack is not, it's crucial for us doing what we did with the game in terms of Triforce percent, in terms of the plot and everything. But the expansion pack is not what makes the exploits possible. You could have done all of this up until the hyperspeed loader, and you could load a small amount of data into memory that's not the expansion pack and still fit it in some unused memory in various places. So you could still do something like this, but without the large amounts of custom content.
Right, yeah, just like a smaller scale for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Ultimately, what it gave us was just a lot faster presentation for GDQ. We theoretically could have done exactly the same thing, kinda, sorta, by staging it in multiple sections and kind of using TASBot as a very slow memory extension, but it wouldn't have been a very pleasant experience.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, that makes
So
sense.
I think we can go through the bootstrappers before our break. I'll try
no
to
problem.
make this not super long, but yeah.
Oh yeah,
do
I
have,
did
like-
need to take an actual break, but
Another question or two. Oh yeah, this was just for questions. So we
Yeah,
got a
okay.
little time. We do have, are there a finite number of input combinations to store code in, or does that even matter?
we'll probably be covering how we're transmitting code here in a second, so you'll get a better
Right.
picture of that in just a moment.
Perfect.
I think what they're
somebody says,
probably I think what they're probably asking is are there some things that you can't enter on the controller as buttons that are instructions that you would need to execute? And the answer is yes. Well, that'll be on a slide in a couple minutes.
Awesome. Somebody says, if you do all of that successfully, do you get mail?
Do you get mail?
Yeah, no, it's just a joke.
I'm not sure. I certainly got lots of email, and not all of it was pleasant. Most of it was.
Yeah, I'm sure. Bringing on the idea to even do this, if you go back and you listen to the very beginning of this show on Backseat Gaming Crew, Thorin has a great answer onto what inspired him to want to start working on this in the first place, and then kind of how the two of them started working together. So there is some
Yeah, and
information
we'll also
there.
talk more about the motivation at the end when we get to the emotional stuff.
Oh yeah,
Perfect.
and
All
there
right,
will
I
be.
think we're-
Just be prepared. Get your tissue
we're at a
boxes
good
ready,
spot.
folks.
Continue on, my friends. Continue on.
All right. Are you ready to dive into what these bootstrappers do?
Yes.
Yeah, I am.
All right. So this is going to be pretty wild. Okay. So first of all, we should talk about what inputs are actually happening here. So there are just 24 bytes of memory dedicated to the controllers. We talked about it earlier, but there's 2 bytes for the buttons, 2 bytes for the analog stick, 1 error byte, 1 0 byte, and there are 4 of these sets. There's 1 for each controller. Now, a MIPS assembly instruction is always 32 bits long, or 4 bytes, and it's always aligned to a 4-byte boundary. So if the controllers are treated as assembly instructions, here's how they'll end up being organized. The first instruction consists of the first controller's buttons and analog stick bytes. The second instruction is the first controller's error code, a 0 byte, and then the second controller buttons. Kind of confusing. Third instruction is the second controller analog bytes, its error code, and then a 0 byte. The next 3 instructions are the same. They're just for controllers 3 and 4. So if a controller is connected, which all 4 of them are right now, the error code is always going to be 0, meaning there's no error. This means that there are 4 instructions that will always be half zero, which is really not helpful to what we need to do. There's one other code in the game that zeroes out all of the input from controllers 2 and the 4 already, so since those were already in use for debugging features, something the developers did. So basically, it's zeroed out before we can even read it. That only leaves us with 2 instructions we fully control, or rather almost fully control, because there are only 14 buttons on the Nintendo 64 controller, which means there are 2 bits in this data byte that will usually always be 0 because there are no buttons mapped to them. So we opted to just not use these for the sake of making this run theoretically possible by a superhuman. Now, because these 2 bits default to 0...
We should mention we did not cheat on those 2 bits. We didn't set them, but we did cheat with the stick in terms of we put in any XY value, even if it's an XY value that you can't physically push the stick to.
Unless your controller's really worn or other things.
Unless it's really worn or it's a third-party controller or something like that. So exactly. I have seen that question. We did not restrict ourselves on the stick ranges.
Yeah, that would have been a little bit too limiting. But as it is, we did not use these 2 bits. That will always be 0. So after executing the controller code as data, or I'm sorry, the controller data as code, we still need a way to return back to the normal game function, or we don't get our more wishes from the genie. We can't just let the program counter continue running past the end of the data, so we need to return back to that function, or from that function. So because of the 2 bits that are forced to be 0, we can't encode a return function, and we also need to restore the stack, but we can't do that in just 1 instruction. So we encode a jump to some code which restores the stack and returns, but that unfortunately means that we are limited to just a single instruction, just 1. So as long as the Wonder item is on screen, this code will run every single frame, and we can always change what buttons are being pressed on each frame. So we can execute whatever code we like as long as we do it at a frequency of only 1 instruction per frame, and Ocarina of Time runs at 20 frames per second. So in order to account for lag frames, we also did one other thing. We sent everything twice, because we talked about this earlier. We can't really predict where lag frames will happen. So ultimately, because we're duplicating input and we're doing all this crazy stuff, that means that we have 1 instruction per 2 frames at 20 frames a second, or roughly about 10 instructions per second total. So the question, I guess, is, what can you do with only 1 instruction? And the answer is not a whole lot. Basically, our instructions are not even contiguous, but there is a handy little global pointer register that we can take advantage of.
We got very lucky that the N64 ABI had a register that we can access that is never used by anything in the game. And so on 1 frame, we can set that value, and on the next frame, millions of instructions later, that value will still be there, and we can write into memory. And so we encode alternating sequences on alternating frames of load a value, 16 bits, into this register, and then on the next frame, millions of instructions later, store that somewhere in memory. Yeah, it's nuts that we're able to even do that at all. So if that register hadn't been there, this would have been a much, much more difficult task. Probably could have figured out some way to jerry-rig something, but this made it just, okay, well, then we can do this, then we can write sort of arbitrary code into memory, and then we can execute that code, and then you can see how that can get us some more wishes. Yeah, we were very, very fortunate to have this. Okay, so Bootstrapper 1 very, very slowly writes Bootstrapper 2. So it's creating a lot of crazy stuff, and then the last thing it does is a jump instruction that it encodes to jump to the beginning of the program that it just wrote, which is Bootstrapper 2, and from there on, it's running like normal code all at once in a single frame. So, all right, let's talk about what Bootstrapper 2 does. Bootstrapper 2 is. Bootstrapper 3 is back to how Bootstrapper 1 works. But Bootstrapper 2, the function of Bootstrapper 1 is that bit by bit, it writes in Bootstrapper 2 into memory and then runs Bootstrapper 2. Bootstrapper 2 runs all at once. It re-enables controller 2 and 4 input, which Nintendo had turned off. It just jumps to the controller data right away. When it pulls the controllers, it just jumps to the controller data right there, rather than using the Wonder item. And it actually fixes the wonder item that we corrupted before. It fixes that because we don't need two sources of arbitrary code execution. We only want one at a time. And then it actually sets up another address for Bootstrapper 4, but we don't worry about that. Bootstrapper 3, or do you want to take over again, Dwango?
You can keep going. You're doing such a fantastic job, and most of this is.
It's all right, but I'm going to be talking for the second half of this, so you can.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. So, although I might have gotten a little bit lost. Okay, so you already talked about it patching.
So Bootstrapper 3 works the same way as Bootstrapper 1 on alternate frames. It is loading a value into the register and then storing it to a specific place in memory. And I should mention, Bootstrapper 1, the memory that we were using for this is the font buffer. So when you have text on screen, the game loads the characters of the font from the cartridge into RAM. And so we're just using that memory because we know as long as there's no text box on screen, it's unused. And actually, if you pull up a text box during the process, you will see the code. Well, you'll see little pixels of the code getting written into the characters, and then it'll crash because it'll execute the font as code, which we don't want. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that. And then Bootstrapper 3 is written somewhere else.
Yeah.
It's actually at the beginning of the expansion pack.
Yeah. So we're already up to Bootstrapper 4, so that went fast.
Yes. Yes.
Bootstrapper 4 is active. When Bootstrapper 4 is active, the controllers are still being executed as code, but the first controller just jumps to the start of the Bootstrapper 4's code, and that leaves us with the other three controllers that can encode extra data. So before, we couldn't use these controllers because they were zeroed out and because they had to encode the extra jump instruction back to safety, but they're no longer zeroed out, and we can treat them as data. So it's going to read 64 bits of data, so that's 30 bits from the controllers 3 and 4, and 4 bits from controller 2. It's not much. It ends up being kind of weird. Oh, and also there's a little note. These bits have to stay 0 so that we encode a no-op. The ones up in yellow in the upper right corner there have to stay 0. So we do have some weird limitations. But basically, this gets us to 64 bits a frame, 60 frames a second, and gets us up to 1 byte. With 1 byte being 8 bits, that gets us 480 bytes a second. But we're not done yet. We want to go faster. So we're going to introduce the hyperspeed loader.
So we use Bootstrapper 4 to write the hyperspeed loader into memory, and then we jump to the beginning of the hyperspeed loader, and that sets everything else up. So the hyperspeed loader is the final payload of the Bootstrappers, but it is the very beginning of Triforce% custom content. So you can continue with that, Dwango?
Yeah, so it's going to basically do what you see here on screen. It's going to stop jumping to controller data. It's going to jump to the hyperspeed loader to read the controller data. It reads all 90 available bits from controllers 2 through 4. It pulls the controllers 8 times per frame. And that means
and
that
at this point is where we stop being able to do this in emulators, because there's no emulator that can read your controller or read a TAS file at 8 times per frame, 480 frames per second. So everything after this point had to be tested entirely only on the real console.
Yeah, exactly. So that means 90 bits per pull, 8 pulls per frame, 60 frames a second. That means we are at a rate of 5,400 bytes per second. It's not exactly as hyperspeed as we would like, but that is it. Now, we have one little bit more of the technical explanation before we start diving into the cool stuff. So bear with us just a little longer. If this is too geeky, don't worry. It won't be too bad for much longer. So this third part here is going to talk about these the methods that we used to move with this data around. Now, we're grabbing data
with the hyperspeed loader. This is all about how the hyperspeed loader works.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, we're grabbing 90 bits from the controller 8 times per frame, which results in 90 bytes of data from that forms a single packet. Each packet includes 85 bytes of payload data. There's a 4-byte CRC, a cyclic redundancy check, a CRC, and there's a 1-byte command ID. And what the hyperspeed
And by the way,
loader,
when you're saying there is all of this stuff, we made all of this up. Our team came up with this as the format that we needed. And so, we wrote the hyperspeed loader code. We injected that as the payload for Bootstrapper 4. And then this is our system for having stable communication from the computer to the console.
Yeah, exactly. So we then had to define a few methods of how are we going to handle this. So now we have a data to upload and then where to upload it to. So that's one packet type. The next packet type that we had was a packet type that was a function call. And this function call could also have some additional, basically arguments to it, up to 4 arguments. And then the
if
last
you're a
thing we
programmer,
had-
that will make sense.
Yeah. And the last thing we had was, we'll get into this aspect later, but there were some other data aspects with chat messages, and we'll get into that later. Now, there's one other thing that we want to touch on before we get out of the technical explanation. So there's a bunch of error checking for the packets. So each packet has that 4-byte CRC. That allows the hyperspeed loader to detect if there happen to be any errors in the data. And if the game is in the middle of a loading zone or a loading screen, sometimes there might be packets that just got completely skipped. So we need to detect when there's an error, and we wanted to do that in a way that was realistic. But how do you send data from the controller, from the console back to the controller? Because usually you're sending input to the console, not the other way around. Now, we thought about using the controller pack, and Soren pretty quickly decided that wasn't something that he wanted to do. He wanted to keep it authentic. So instead of using the controller
I would
pack,
love to blame it on you, Dwango, that I said that, it's TASBot rules that everything has to be theoretically possible for a human. A human that could press buttons at an infinite speed, but still a human. A human cannot emulate a memory pack, but a human can feel a rumble pack vibrating. And we have 3 controllers 2, 3, and 4, and we can put a virtual rumble pack into each of those virtual controllers, and we can have code from the console check the CRC, and if it's wrong, it'll rumble the controllers and in a particular pattern to indicate whether the packet came through correctly or not correctly. And theoretically, a superhuman who could press buttons 480 times per second could also feel whether the rumble is on or off 60 times per second and determine what data that meant that the data was right or wrong, and then decide what data to send next. So that is exactly what TASBot is doing.
Yeah, and these weren't a big deal. These didn't come up very often. Okay, all right, you all can take a deep breath. We're done with that. Now we get to move on to a lot more visual entertainment. So this is the point where I'm going to pause and let our producer switch us over to Soren's view.
I think we're probably going to switch for questions and then have a break before we go to me.
That works
I think
for
that's a perfect idea. That was actually what I was going to suggest. You read my mind. Okay, perfect. We did have a question, or it seems like there was a little bit of confusion on when things went from the 20 FPS to the 60 FPS. Was that you all?
Yeah, so Bootstrapper 1, by the way, first of all, this video is up on the Retro Game Mechanics Explained channel. You can look at it. It has perhaps better explanations than we're even giving now. But yes, Bootstrapper 1 runs at 20 frames per second. Bootstrapper 1 injects Bootstrapper 2. One of the things that Bootstrapper 2 does is it changes things so that instead of using the Wonder item to jump to controllers, every time the controllers are pulled at 60 frames per second, that just directly jumps to the controllers. So at that point, it's 60 frames per second, and we don't have to worry about lag frames anymore because that happens regardless of what's happening on screen. So then Bootstrapper 3 works the same way as Bootstrapper 1, but it is happening 60 frames per second. And then
Gotcha.
Bootstrapper 4 happens also at 60 frames per second, and then we go up to 480 frames per second for hyperspeed loader.
Right. And that part I remember.
Or bytes per second,
cool.
yeah.
Okay, well, hopefully that was helpful. Awesome. Okay, well, I'm really excited to see what the next phase of the showcase is. You're like really hyping it up, Dwango, so...
Well, it's
Excited for the next
a
bit?
live demonstration
pretty cool.
of what we've been talking about, or at least part of what we've been talking about, and then going through the run. So
Yeah, so far
Right,
we talked about the how we moved it. Now we get to show you what we did, and that's
Yes.
cool.
Which is really cool, but there have been people in chat who, people are loving this so far anyway. People are like, oh my gosh, I'm an engineer, this is so cool. So all kinds of great reactions, and I can't wait to see it more in process, right? So make sure you all stick around. We will be back in just a few to see some of the results of this and hear more about this explanation and how things are working. Also, just a reminder for you all that HEDQ 2023 online will be from January 8th to the 15th, and game submissions and event volunteer applications are now open. They're open now. Game submissions close at the end of September 21st in a couple of days, and volunteer submissions close on the 24th, so closer to the end of the week. So you can go to gamesdonequick.com for more info. If you want to submit a game, submit an app to volunteer. I always suggest that. Super fun. Why not? Why not just submit and see what happens? Then we also have Fright Fatale, which is a one-day event on October 23rd to celebrate spooky season. And, obviously presented by Flame Fatale. We got Latin History Month coming up. And there's some really fun stuff happening. Then we'll talk about this more at the end of the show, but really awesome, amazing things. So thank you all so much for tuning in so far, and we'll be back in just a few with some more awesome stuff. Don't go anywhere unless you just gotta get up, get water, use the restroom, all that stuff. We take wellness breaks here. So take that wellness break and let's get ready for some more. We'll be right back. Alrighty, and we are back with more That's Never Happened Before. Hello, Kungfufruitcup here, joining you all this evening. If you are just tuning in, oh my goodness, you missed what Dwango called the nerdy part of the showcase this evening. But it has been fantastic so far. Tonight we have on Dwango AC and Soren, who've been showing off a lot of the kind of background coding, setup, information on the Triforce Percent showcase that was the TAS showcase, so Tool Assisted Speedrun, that was shown off at this past SGDQ. It was amazing, and so it's so cool to learn more about it, just how it works, how things relate, how the actors relate with each other in the game, all the things that you can interact with, etc. And then that into just, it's cool to see the things that also relate to the actual any percent runs. So now that we've gotten a lot of the background info on the actual, what looks to be binary and the frames and how the frames all work together and how, I don't know, I'm really bad at summing it up, even though I try. But they did a really wonderful job. So please go back and listen to that if you missed it. But now we get to see the another aspect of it, of kind of what's going on and more of the visual parts, how it's being displayed in games. So I'm going to leave it to Soren and Dwango. You two take it away, and also feel free to do that quick countdown so we can start the timer again for our timer that we don't really need on the show.
All right, should I start the timer then?
Sure, you take it this time, Soren.
All right, again, this is not this is not a speed run. This is a super play, but let's do it anyway. 3, 2, 1, go. I guess I should have started the file at exactly that time also. So actually, I'm going to start by talking a little bit. So this is as we talked about at the earlier in the show, we're going to be showing off Triforce Percent Ocarina of Time Ace Showcase. We're going to be showing off the contents of what we used arbitrary code execution to do, what we managed to make inside the game, I just want to give a little bit of a philosophical, perspective on this, and I'll get more into this at the end also. But arbitrary code execution allows the player to write their own code and execute it in the context of the game somehow. Using glitches, you have 2 steps. You have to somehow get data into memory that represents the code you want to run, and then somehow get the console to actually execute that data as code. And we went over that in the first hour of the show. But when you do that, you're running code that the player has written, not code that the developers have written, code the player has written in the context of the game, and you can change whatever you want about the game. The only limit is your own imagination and your technical ability to create code, create assets, figure out how to do these things. So it's not quite, you can do anything you want. You can do anything that you can develop and run and inject into the system. But there's this, sort of philosophical idea about, is any of this real or not? Is this cheating? Is this stuff really in the game? And, we're gonna explain as we go along every item, every single asset that we talk about, either it was actually beta content left on the cartridge that we're just reactivating with Ace, or it's beta content that was created by Nintendo back in the day, but was not left in the cartridge, and we see it in old, pre-release magazine articles and VHS tapes and things like that, and then we remade it for ourselves, or stuff that we completely made up for the sake of, creating a fun experience, or for making urban legends come true. So we will go through, as we go through all of the content, we will say what each thing is, very specifically. But just at the large scale level, arbitrary code execution blurs the line between what is real and what is not in the context of the game. I mean, the whole game is not, it's a game, it's not our real world, but within that world of the game, arbitrary code execution is something that is in the game. It's exploits and glitches that are in the game that allow you to change the way the game operates. And so some people might feel, and it's fine if you feel this way, that as soon as you've changed any of the rules about the game, you're not playing the real game anymore. But almost there's very little. Some people do speedrunning that is glitchless categories, and there's always arguments about what constitutes a glitch and everything. But most of speedrunning is about fancy and cool and sort of critical uses of glitches to make something new happen in the game, usually to get to the end faster, but more generally to make something cool happen. And arbitrary code execution is the ultimate version of that, because you get to make whatever you can develop happen in game. So it's not an issue about it. It's the whole point that we get to make whatever we want in the game. Another way, if you want to think about this, suppose that you have a friend who has never played Minecraft, and they are, scrolling through YouTube, and a video goes by that says, "I made a computer in Minecraft." And then they ask you, you play Minecraft. Are there computers in Minecraft? Well, what do you tell them? Well, you tell them, there isn't an item in Minecraft that is a computer, right? You can't go up to your crafting table and put in 3 redstone or whatever and get a computer out. There is no computer programmed by the developers, Mojang, in Minecraft. But there are the tools. You can, spend months and months and lay out a bunch of logic circuits and build a computer, and it'll work. It'll be really slow, but you can make a computer that works. And then once you do that, you have a computer in Minecraft, and you make a YouTube video and you say, "I made a computer in Minecraft." So it's similar for arbitrary code execution. Ocarina of Time is not a sandbox game, but the arbitrary code execution exploit turns Ocarina of Time into a sandbox game. Everything that we do after that with the arbitrary code execution is within Ocarina of Time. It's within the same rules that any other speedrun is operating within. You're doing glitches, but you haven't modified anything in advance. So when we showed what we showed at SGDQ was a real Ocarina of Time cartridge, no ROM modifications. It's completely original ROM. We never wrote to it. We can't write to a ROM anyway because it's read-only. But that is for, within the speedrunning consciousness. And again, some people will not play Ace categories because they don't think it's fun or whatever, and that's fine. But, within the speedrunning community, generally there's these rules for what defines the game. It's the unmodified cartridge and the unmodified console. You sit down and you press buttons. And that's the game. We never leave that box. But we create so much within that box, including things which could have never been done in 1998, which, we're not it's not even supposed to be done on an N64. That's the whole point. So, that's what we're going to show. And of course, the plot of Triforce Percent starts very small with some, small things and works its way up to, a big finale. So, you can look forward to that. And before I get started on the actual contents here, I also want to explain. So, as we explained in the first half, we need a human speedrunner save state to do the Ace setup. It is something that you have to be a, leaderboard class speedrunner for Ocarina of Time to be able to do it. Dwango tried it. He failed. We had another speedrunner try it who wasn't able to do it. I never tried to do the Ace setup because I know that I don't have the skills. So it's very difficult. And in order to, we wanted to show this at this presentation, and we don't have save state here on call with us. So we are cheating a little bit. The ROM that is playing right now has a small mod. It's only a few hundred bytes. And what it does is it will give us arbitrary code execution for free. So we don't have to do the setup. It will jump to the controllers when we get close to the wonder item. It'll just start jumping to controllers. Other than that, there are no modifications to this ROM. So all of the custom content, all the custom scenes, all the music, all that stuff will be injected by the TAS replay device, the same board that TASBot was holding at SGDQ. Everything else will be injected, but just at the beginning, we're cheating to get the initial ace just for today. Did not happen at GDQ. At GDQ, it was a real cartridge. Save State did the exploit. For today, sorry, I'm not skilled enough. I'm not a speedrunner. I'm an engineer. That's why TAS is appealing, because I don't have to be skilled with the fingers.
So there's a 271 byte difference between this original gold cartridge, the version 1 US release, and what we put on a flash cart. This happens to be an EverDrive, but any flash cart would do. We made a 271 byte change to the game that allows us to jump as a shortcut that substitutes for everything that Save State was able to do. They're incredible. We are not at their level.
Yeah, and if Railcoon here will bear with me for a second, I will show the code that we've changed here. So I'm switching to my other scene. May look a little wrong on the stream for a moment, but once you can see this. So on the right here, this is the code for Hack Wonder Item. You can see this is the modification that we made. This is the mod that is running here. Just in full disclosure, this is what an Ocarina of Time actor, a very simple one, looks like. There is a function that is running in it, a function for destroy, a function for update, and draw function we're not using because this doesn't have to draw. So this replaces all of the invisible rupees in the game, and all it does is init. If it's not in the right status, it just kills itself, destroys itself, and then on every update, if the distance to the player is less than a certain value, it will flush the caches, which is basically write everything out to memory, and then it will call ace destination, which is defined to be this. This is the address of the controller data. So basically, every frame that you're close enough, it will jump to controllers. That is all this is doing. This is the only modification to the game that you're going to see. Everything else will be injected, and we'll explain that as that goes. So with that out of the way, I'm switching back to the game here.
So sorry, Ray.
Yeah. Thank you for our producer, helping us with this. So here's the game, Ocarina of Time. This is a save file just starting at the beginning of the game. I've just talked to Saria and then saved. What we're going to do, the wonder item's over there, past that fence. So I'm just going to line myself up here. And then I'm going to run the set of... this is the TAS movie file. This is a set of inputs that goes through the bootstrappers 1 through 4. As the Link is going to walk forward into the area of effect, the game will start jumping to controllers, but the controller data will be run by the replay device at that point, and then it will go through the bootstrappers. So I'm going to switch controller. I'm going to unpause. I'm switching controller 1 to the replay device. So all 4 controllers are connected to the replay device, and it is playing this TAS movie in. And you may notice that it's a little different, that Link is, rolling instead of sitting on the ground with a shield. In this case, we actually don't care where he goes. But yeah, it's done. That was bootstrappers 1 through 4. That's all done. The hyperspeed loader is loaded into memory and waiting for further commands, and is drawing a little green bar in the corner. The reason we put a green bar in the corner is to tell ourselves that everything worked correctly so far, so that we know it works correctly so far, but also because the game natively, if you crash, you get a yellow bar in the corner. And if you crash the crash debugger, you get a red bar in the corner. And so we put a green bar in the corner to mean the game is pwned, we have control over everything, we can do whatever we want. So from there, I'm going to switch controller. I have just switched controller 1 back to my controller here. So I can move Link around now. And I'm going to run the next step of the injection. This was all done on stage, except the actual setup was done by Save State instead of using the shortcut. This was all done on stage, and while we were talking, Dwango was sitting here typing away on the laptop to run each of these scripts. So this is the next script. This is using the hyperspeed loader and injecting data that is at specific fixed addresses in memory that is linked to fixed addresses in memory. These are on the expansion pack. And things have to, the way the whole system works is a little, changes around a little bit. Things have to be done in that order. And that is running. Just give me 1 second here. Just have to double check because I was testing something else earlier. I just want to double check that I have this all in the right order.
So really
Sorry
quick
about this. Give me
here.
1 second. Yep, go ahead.
So Soren is using a TAS TM32 replay device made by Onosaurus. You can theoretically buy one of these if you want to. I'm not trying to sell anything. We don't make money on this. This is totally a cottage industry. We don't always have stock, but when we do, you can go to shop.tas.bot. That's shop.tas.bot to get a TAS TM32 board of your own. Soren has one of his own. I have one here. This is the version 4. Onosaurus did a fantastic job. The MOS 2312 helped out a ton. So these are available if you want to try to do this on your own, but it will take a lot of work and you won't be able to do everything we are doing here, just so you're aware, because there's some things we weren't able to release.
Right, and we'll get into that later at the end. But back to the game. So the first set of data is done injecting. That took about, another 15 seconds or so. And that is a bunch of data this is our sort of patches to the OOT engine. This is data that was linked to static locations in memory. Basically, the game can be divided into code and data that have to be in known locations in memory, and then files. So animations or music or textures or whatever are separate files that the game has to know where they are at any time, but it doesn't really matter where they are as long as there's a directory basically that says where they are. And so as long as it can look it up in the directory and find it, it doesn't really matter where it is. It doesn't matter what order they are. So that first part is done injecting. And we had to have that finished before Link goes through a loading zone, because if Link goes through a loading zone during that, it will crash basically. The whole system of retrying, looking at the rumble results and retrying things if there's an error, that's all fine and dandy. But when we're overwriting parts of the engine, if there's an error, we're messed up immediately. So we have to make that not happen. But as soon as I run the next strip, and this is a script that is just going to start injecting all of the rest of the data for the rest of the run. And this is going to take about 6 or 7 minutes, depending on how long it takes to go through loading zones and things. It has injected a whole bunch of patches for scenes, for items. It's injecting Naburu right now. It injected the Beta Kokiri. It's going through things. It has the biggest things for the finale scene at the end. And so once that has started, we have to go through a loading zone, and we also have to pause. And the loading zone and the pause cause the game to reload all aspects of the game. There are some things that are reloaded through a loading zone, and there's other things, including Link, that are reloaded when you pause. Actually, Link is not in memory when you get the pause, when you open up the pause screen. It unloads Link, it loads in the pause screen into the same memory. So this will allow us to force a reload of Link, and then our patches to the engine stick in some patches when it loads Link. It sticks those patches in as it loads Link, and we need those patches to be active. So so far you haven't seen anything that special, but here we go. Here's our first piece of this is actually debug content, not beta content, but this was made by the developers. This is the inventory editor. This was used by the developers to set up Link's state so that they could mess around, try different aspects of the game. I do not remember exactly all of the items I'm going to need, so I'll do my best guess, but I'm probably going to miss some. So in order to turn this on, we had to, we said live, we had to write 1 byte into memory. It's true, it's 1 byte that enables this, but we actually wrote a handler that checks constantly when the pause menu is open, whether you're pressing L. And when you press L, it turns on that 1 byte to turn on the inventory editor. But you can see this is actually used at one point in the Majora's Mask any % speedrun. They used a different glitch to basically write to memory arbitrarily and turn on the 1 byte for the inventory editor, and then just gave themselves all the items and warp, use the in-game mechanics to warp to the end of the game. So I'm giving myself all this. These are all the songs. These are the spiritual stones. This was the fire medallion. This is the swords and shields. These are the upgrades for like silver scale and wallet and things like that. And then these are some of the normal items. This is rupees. This is hearts. I go back out of the screen. You can see I have a bunch of stuff now. Give myself sword and shield. Give myself ocarina and boomerang and bottled bugs. Anything you want to add at the moment, Dwango?
No, all I'm going to mention is that one of the things that was a constant comment after the effect is that we weren't very specific about, or we tried to be specific and very clear, but there was some confusion around what was beta content, what was on the cartridge, and what wasn't. What you just saw, that really is on the cartridge. It's dev content.
Yes.
I wouldn't necessarily call it beta, so just to rehash that point. But a lot of other stuff we created ourselves, and we'll try to be very specific as we go through this of what's what.
Yeah, so here is our next thing to show here. This is the R-Wing from Star Fox 64. This is actually on the cartridge. We just literally had to run a few instructions to cause it to spawn. This was created by the developers back in 1998 to test physics for the Fire Dragon Volvagia. Basically the idea was Volvagia would, fly around the sky, and they thought it would fly, or she would fly like an R-Wing would, and so they made an R-Wing, but they left it in the game, and it has all these, custom animations and laser sounds and everything. So yes, that is real beta content, or not even beta in the sense that they never expected to have the R-Wing in the final game, but it was actually made by the developers. And
yeah, it's like when the developers are making stuff and they throw things in fun. Also, it's one of my favorite things that people discovered that is in this game, and I just had to say something about it.
Yeah, and you may be asking, how did we spawn it? Well, we wrote code to listen for button presses, and when I hold L plus D down, it will spawn the R-Wing, and I can spawn this anywhere. I forget if I read the code that it would check if one is already spawned. Let's find out. Yeah, it checks if one is already spawned. It won't spawn another one if one is already spawned, but this one is spawned. It's out there. I will just ignore it for now, and I could spawn that anywhere. Oh, it's shooting at me. So this is the next thing. This is completely fabricated, this exits sequence. This is not on the cartridge at all, but we needed a place to start with the getting people to suspend their disbelief about maybe I could have done this. And in a sense, you could have done this if you had actually done the ACE setup. You could have done something like this, but not just by going to the woods and doing this sequence of exits. So this is the sequence of exits that you need to go through, in order to go through the Lost Woods in Zelda 1. Except in Zelda 1, you just literally navigate northwest, southwest. Whereas here, we're getting lost out of a north exit, then getting lost out of a west exit, then getting lost out of a south exit, and then getting lost out of a west exit. And again, this is just completely custom code that we wrote. That is checking for these. It's actually running every frame, checking where Link is and whether he is in this scene and within a certain radius of these points, which we placed in the exit areas. So as he's walking out, he'll cross through that radius. And hopefully, you hear a Zelda chime here. That means that this was successful, that we have, successfully entered the right code. You will hear as we, in our commentary, we did not say this was on the cartridge. We said, it wasn't really clear if anyone had, gone through this pattern of exits before, or if they did, if they knew what to find next. And that's true that it's not clear if anyone did actually leave the woods in that order. But no, on your cartridge at home, this will not work unless, of course, you do the full ACE setup and then you start injecting data through the controllers somehow. Then this will work, because that is actually, the ACE setup is actually how you do this. So what this Lost Woods exit code has unlocked is the beta Kokiri, or this is more like a beta Kokiri, because there are several of them. So this beta
several
Kokiri...
tops and bottoms, heads and bodies.
Yes. So the beta Kokiri head is a 3D model left on the cartridge. The beta Kokiri body is 3D model left on the cartridge, and there's actually several of each of them. The skeleton and the animation are left on the cartridge. However, the dialogue is made up by our team, written by our writers. The the quest idea where the beta Kokiri is looking for a butterfly specifically. The butterfly is a beta item, but the idea of the Kokiri looking for the butterfly is not beta. That is something that we just made up. Because the idea is we have these individual pieces of beta content. We want to make a story that will have a certain progression to it that will eventually lead to the Triforce. So beta Kokiri, actual beta content to some extent, but not the dialogue. He's looking for bugs. We'll give him some bugs. He does not like these bugs. I am tempted to narrate, but I probably should not do that.
I mean, I got you if you need it.
Yeah. Oh, you can do
right.
it.
Nah, I won't do it. So we're going to. We got him with his eyes closed, and the blinking animations and everything is also part of the model that was on the cartridge. So we're going to warp to the Temple of Time, which we're going to Castletown Market to buy him a butterfly. So this brings us to our next piece of beta content. So this butterfly, there are two aspects of it that are beta content actually left on the cartridge. There is the 3D model that you will be seeing in a moment that actually has a bug that we patched the bug, which is ironic because it's a bug. We patched the bug in the display list on the butterfly using arbitrary code execution. But other than that, the model is actually there on the cartridge. And there is an entry in one of the item tables for a butterfly, and it is with all of the other bottle items. So it is clear that this was, it's a beta item. However, the idea of it being in this shop, the idea of the shopkeeper's dialogue and the quest for it and everything, that is, made up by us to showcase the butterfly. Because, we got to do it. We can just load the 3D model in front of Link and look at it, but that's no fun. You got to, want to actually see it. So butterfly is not in the shop. Talk to the owner. He has custom text here. And so I should mention that, there are, there's every custom aspect. It's not just that we had to, let's say, write the text. We also had to write the code that would allow us to change the text on the fly. That's actually, so the interesting part about the text, let me just pause that thought here. Here's the butterfly. This is the 3D model. The wings would be a little corrupted if we didn't fix that bug, but we fixed the bug. This is what it looks like. I'm gonna buy it for 35 rupees. No, we don't want to buy anything else. And I'm gonna warp back to the woods. So yeah, the text, the interesting part of that is that the text patching, we're actually using code left on the cartridge for the N64DD expansion to Ocarina of Time, which is also known as Zelda. So this is, Ocarina of Time code to support Zelda. That is, so for the expansion, they needed to be able to patch text in the game from the N64DD. And so we're actually hooking into that, not completely using the original, but largely using the original code there and hooking into that and using that to make our custom text. So that is actually more beta content, some juicy Zelda content for you, even though it's just, some function, some code that you never see. So here we are almost back at our beta Kokiri. I should also mention the injection is done. I've spent enough time gabbing here about everything that it has managed to inject all the data for the finale scene. And, for the rest of the time here, I could just unplug the replay device until we get to the finale scene. We need to inject further data. Other than that, it's just done. And I'm just playing on controller 1. Everything is in the expansion pack. All of the patches have been made to the OS, made to the game engine, and it's just going to pull that data from the memory as it needs it. So you see butterfly. We have a custom icon for the butterfly designed by our artists. Also custom text there that says butterfly, made by our artists. We can equip it to the C button, show it to the beta Kokiri. This is actually, so I mentioned the butterfly has an entry in one of the item tables. It doesn't have an entry in all of the item tables. So this is actually a big PO that we overwrote as butterfly.
Did you say you overwrote a PO?
Yes, this is actually a big PO. Because it is, the butterfly is in one of the item tables, but we need it in all of the item tables. And instead of enlarging the tables, we just replace something.
That's
So,
clever.
oh, sorry?
I was just saying that that's very clever to do it that way.
Yeah. There's a lot of things where, like, we know exactly what we're going to show, and so it's made to do exactly that. And if you, like, go out of bounds of that, you know, it just won't work or whatever. So this magic powder, this is called Odd Potion. This is a normal adult Link trading item. It took me 5 hours to get that Odd Potion to float at the correct height above Link's hands for this shot here, rather than to be over his hand. Because when adult Link pulls out an item, he holds it out with one hand and it hovers over his hand like this. And it was doing the same thing for young Link because this is an adult Link item. That took 5 hours to fix that. And there are so many little things throughout the presentation which were just like that, where it kind of worked, but then it wasn't right, and we had to make it look, because, you know, if that was wrong, that would have looked like, oh, that doesn't look convincing. That couldn't have been, you know, made by Nintendo back in the day. But since it was all, you know, really up to the quality, then we were able to keep people's suspension of disbelief alive through the rest of the project.
And that's a huge point. That suspension of disbelief was a major element of conversation for us throughout the development of this. I don't know how many odd calls we had about, hey, how do we handle this element and how do we keep people in that moment without breaking it. And the downside of us doing that is that we did end up in a situation where some people didn't know what was beta content and what wasn't. But anyway.
Oh, I should also mention, while I'm here, the text magic powder is custom because it's actually normally named Odd Potion. So here's our Skull Kid friend. We're just going to say no here. And just FYI, this is a completely custom Skull Kid. I mean, like, the 3D model and animations are normal, but we totally overwrote the vanilla Skull Kid actor and replaced it with this one that just does this one thing and nothing else. Because, you know, that's how this works. So we wrote some backstory. Our other writer, wrote most of this text. So the idea of this was, you know, in terms of a plot standpoint, you know, we started out with the exits, activate a beta Kokiri. This was something so small and insignificant, getting a bug for a Kokiri, and it builds up from thing to thing until we get the Triforce at the end. So Skull Kid is going to sprinkle magic powder on our masks to make them more powerful. So there are only 2 masks that this works on. Again, this will not work on anything other than what we exactly made it for. So we have the Gerudo mask, which will now actually work correctly. And we have the bunny hood, which will also, and I do not have the skill of save state to be able to equip both of these at the same time. That is another glitch speedrunning strategy, to be able to equip 2 copies of the same item at the same time, that they were able to do during the live run, but I'm actually not good enough at the game. So about these masks are these beta content. There is no leftover code in Ocarina of Time cartridge for the bunny hood running fast like it does in Majora's Mask. However, Majora's Mask is full of ideas that were in development for Ocarina of Time and then cut. And the fact that these masks are in Ocarina of Time as the trading sequence, and then the bunny hood was in Majora's Mask and actually worked, leads us to believe that, well, of course they wanted the masks to have functions, and they just left the mask side quest in Ocarina of Time in this vestigial state and turned the main contents of that into a completely new game. Then, you know, it's a new game. So is this beta content? Well, it's not. So this isn't reactivating something that was found in the cartridge, but this is stuff that the developers were thinking about and left in Ocarina of Time in the state that you know it as the mask side quest, and then, you know, became its full version from Majora's Mask. Now, if you're wondering how we actually did the bunny hood running, this is actually not the version from Majora's Mask. He's running faster than in Majora's Mask. This is the version from a ROM hack called The Missing Link, an Ocarina of Time ROM hack. So we built on their code for this version. many of the same developers from that ROM hack, or the same people who worked on Triforce Percent. So here's a Gerudo here, this Gerudo guard guarding this gate. She has normal dialogue, waves us off. Normally, if we wear the Gerudo mask here, she has unique dialogue. She will say, "You've got guts, kid," coming around, wearing something like that. But I'm sure many people saw the Gerudo mask, saw the gate and the guard, and thought, "Oh, well, I'd love to, the mask ought to work. She's got to let me in." So, she says, "Gerudo child, far from the desert, your father must be Hylian." As we know from the Gossip Stones in Ocarina of Time, the Gerudos leave Gerudo Valley out to Hyrule to find their, boyfriends, as the game says. And so, she is assuming that we are a half Hylian, half Gerudo child, and will open the gate for us. So this is a completely custom actor. I believe this one is one that we took the actor from the original actor code and then made a bunch of modifications to open the gate and everything. These guards are the original guard, but with an assembly patch. So it's the original code gets loaded into memory, and then patches get applied in assembly language to have them respond and speak these flavor text lines to us. So they're talking about how hard life is for them over in the desert here.
Serious credit to the writing team for coming up with these lines too, because it was so. One of the things that was so interesting about the suspension of disbelief is the lines were so good, you honestly could not tell what was in the original game and what we had added.
Yeah, and we had
Agreed.
people.
That's how I felt as well. Yeah.
We had people reacting to this saying, like, "I can't believe that text was localized and left on the game cartridge." So, it wasn't. It was made by us, but thank you. Our writers are flattered. And this was 2.5 years of effort, and a lot of that was on the content of making this as high quality and as good quality as the original game. And so I should mention I'm changing my masks here out of view of the Gerudos, but actually we've given ourselves the Gerudos card, so they will not arrest us even if I don't have the mask, just because they see that we're in the club already. So the hiding from them is not actually a game mechanic; that's just performance.
Yeah, we broke that disillusion in this playthrough by just putting on the mask in front of the guard that was at the gate. But
right, I can just take off the mask here, and they'll just continue speaking the same. They'll go. This is looping through the four lines of dialogue. This scene. So Naburu is not normally here. This is totally custom Naburu actor, and some of the animations are actually also custom. So this scene is actually tricky. We have to have the camera over here when we start, or else you will have problems. If we have the camera facing the other way, you will. This guard gets special treatment, but the other guards just get deleted. And so if the camera is aiming the wrong way, you just see the guard disappear. So we have to have the camera somewhere over here, ideally. Sort of try to get this a little better. Yeah, there we go. And then talk to her, and it'll be fine. So as soon as we start talking to her, what happens is, so Naburu's code is totally custom. These guards are pretty much unmodified, but Naburu will actually immediately delete the other guards and then start overwriting this guard's position information. So Naburu is basically mind controlling this guard to make her walk back and forth. It basically shuts off the normal code for her, and it's actually Naburu's code that is making the guard walk back and forth here. And that's because we needed the guard to be walking back and forth in view of the camera and not walking all the way to the side. And the reason for that is when the guard exits, if the guard is way over on the side, sorry, it would be this way on your screen, then the guard will run really quickly to get to the exit, and we didn't want that. So I had to play with this a whole bunch to get the guard to walk back and forth. So you can think about it as the guard is eavesdropping on our conversation and just pretending to be busy, walking back and forth here, and actually, staying close within the camera so that as soon as whatever moment we interrupt her, wherever she is, she will turn to Naburu for this line of dialogue: "For guards, you may leave the girl and I alone." And then she will follow this path And if the first segment of the path is too long, then it won't look realistic. So that's what we had to do to get that to look right. Nibiru can see through our disguise, blah, blah, blah. We added every single line of dialogue of this has the in the text format, there's a command for don't let you skip it. And we added that to every single line of dialogue so that save state couldn't accidentally mash through the dialogue and skip it during the live run.
By the way, I didn't actually know about all that guard handling. Somehow that never came up in any of our conversations. Yeah, so I'm just learning about this now.
You didn't have to know about that.
Yeah. I didn't need to know.
Yep.
That's awesome.
And so I should also mention for the world, all of the code and assets that we created, our team ourselves, are released on our GitHub. We did not release any Nintendo copyrighted anything. Textures, whatever, some of the models from the ending. But this Nibiru code, github.com/Triforce%, Triforce-% written out, /Triforce-% written out. You can just see the code for Nibiru. You can see the code for, it's like 85% of everything we released, because just the copyrighted pieces that, if we released those, they would get shut down. So we didn't release those, but we released everything that we have made. So you can look at this code. You're welcome to, there's a very permissive license on it. You can use it in your own projects, everything like that. So this is actually our first custom cutscene, having the camera pull back here. There's going to be a larger custom cutscene here in a moment. And this whole concept of Nibiru teaching Link the full Song of Time is mostly made up, though there's a couple elements of it that are sort of have some basis in the game. So I'll talk about that in a moment. But this is a fully custom cutscene here. I will go through and show a bit later how some of this stuff is made behind the scenes in Blender. I was a tools developer before I started this project, so a big chunk of the effort of this project was actually making or fixing or updating tools for the OOT community to make all of this content possible. That then has helped other projects in the future. So this is now all custom cutscene. Every little camera motion is waiting for a text to finish and then doing the next little shot. And Nibiru is, so the point of this was we needed to somehow get from getting into Gerudo Fortress to Link having the full Song of Time. And this is how we sort of wrote in terms of, writing. We wrote our way there. We'll say no. I know you want to stop Ganondorf. Of course, we don't want to have, we wanted to have something for that, but we didn't want to have a complete alternate outcome. So here we go. So that's a custom animation for Nibiru. The Shanai is custom. This is the instrument in the background music of the Spirit Temple. So we just made up and said, oh, well, okay, that means Nibiru plays the instrument, so we're going to give her one. It's a little sort of Middle Eastern oboe kind of instrument, but it really looks like that. And this is another custom animation. And this full Ocarina system is semi already there in the game and then semi custom. So the icons for sharp and flat and up and down are custom, but the concept of having an Ocarina system that supports all of the notes is not custom. That is actually to some extent already in the game, and I'll describe that more in a moment. And, Save State had to practice a bunch to be able to do that. I've been playing this song for, a year and a half over and over building this project, so I can do it most of the time. We actually had a bug for a while that if you messed up the song input, it was just like my mistake. It wasn't some serious bug, but if you messed up the song input and this teaching, this in this shot, it would go to the wrong text box and then you would soft lock. And so had to fix that before the final version.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, another little custom cutscene. This has all been part of the same custom cutscene. And I'll talk about Nibiru in a moment here. But one last thing, you'll notice she still has the Shanai in her hand, and she is still following us. The game actually has, I should mention while we're here, the game has code that is shared by most NPCs for doing things like having them follow Link, follow him with their gaze, and having him Z-target the correct part of their body and all of that kind of stuff. So to talk about Nabooru and the full Song of Time and everything, there's and I have to sort of pay attention to this as I'm talking, which is I'm not the best multitasker in the world here. So the blue blocks of time, the Song of Time blocks, when you play the Song of Time, they appear and disappear, but they're not actually just appearing or disappearing. They're actually going to the opposite timeline. So a block that you play, if you're Child Link and you play the song, it goes to the Adult Link timeline, and then if you go there, you'll see it. And, this is not used in any puzzles in the game, except in one place in a lava room in Goron City. It's not actually used in any dungeons or anything like that. It's just sort of like a throwaway side room where they have those. That's the only place in the game that you can actually see that the block is going forward and back in time. Every other place the blocks are used are in a dungeon that you can only access as one age, and other than using speedrunning strategies to cheat your way into there, which of course you can do that. So these blocks were obviously made to go back forward and back in time, and then they weren't used for that purpose. So we can sort of estimate that they would have been used for puzzles where you actually need to send them back and forth in time, and then you would need to go back and forth in time to interact with them, like actual time puzzles, sort of like Skyward Sword kind of stuff. And that isn't in the final game. But the Spirit Temple in the final game is this two-sided dungeon where you do the dungeon as Adult Link and Child Link. And so we said, okay, well, there's, we can speculate that at some point, because of the blocks of time, at some point they must have been thinking about time puzzles where you actually go back and forth in time. And you have the Spirit Temple where you need to have Child and Adult Link. And in order to do one of these puzzles, you would have to not go and just put the Master Sword back or pull the Master Sword and go back to the dungeon. You'd actually have to be able to do it right there. And that's, so there need to be some way of doing that. And on top of all of that, at the very end of Ocarina of Time, when Zelda sends Link back to his childhood, she doesn't play the Song of Time. She plays Zelda's Lullaby. And not only does she play Zelda's Lullaby, she plays Zelda's Lullaby an octave down. So she's playing a not correct octave version of Zelda's Lullaby to send Link back in time. And that is canonically will send Link back in time, because you see it happen in the game. So it's like, okay, obviously, and then the Song of Time, the only thing that the Song of Time does is it opens the door of time and it sends these blocks back and forth in time, but it doesn't do anything for Link. And it satisfies some frogs. It makes them happy. But other than that, that's all the song is used for. So, we said, okay, let's just put it together and say, okay, there is some. We think that maybe at some point in development they were intending the Spirit Temple to have time puzzles where you actually go back in time, use the blocks, Link plays the Song of Time to go back and forth in time, but then we need it to be a different version of it. We want to show off this other Ocarina system, which exists. So yeah, a word about the Ocarina system. So in the game, there are two systems in the code for handling Ocarina songs. And every single song is in both systems in the game. It's actually duplicated. The data for the song is in both different formats. One of the formats only detects the 5 notes, and one of the formats can detect and handle all of the in-between notes. And that second format, with all the in-between notes, is used in the final game for the Scarecrow song, the long Scarecrow song that you can teach to one of the Scarecrows, which is then played after the end credits. After you beat the game, if you wait for a couple minutes, it'll play your Scarecrow song back to you. And you can use pitch bends, you can use the in-between notes, you can do whatever you want. It can be a very long song. And then the other Scarecrow song, the one that you actually use to spawn the Scarecrow, uses the shorter system, where it just has the 5 notes. So both of those systems exist. And I should mention that the long system with the long Scarecrow, it's not just used for the long Scarecrow. It's used for every time you learn a song. So like I learned that song from Nabooru, even if that was vanilla in the vanilla game, anytime you learn a song from any character, it's using the long system, because the NPCs will sometimes put in vibrato and things like that in the song playback. And after you finish the main, let's say the first 6 notes or whatever, the song will continue for a few notes and play the next piece of it. And that has to use the in-between notes also. So that system exists, it's used in the game, and the shorter system exists, and that's also used in the game, and they both sort of coexist and are used for different things. And so what we did is we made a bunch of patches with arbitrary code execution to use the long system for everything, or actually more accurately, to change the short system so that the short system also supports all of the notes. That's actually what we did. We didn't really patch the long system. And so we patched most things. One thing we didn't patch was the interface here. You can see the notes are glitchy. The A's, the notes that are A will show up as a C right, because that's actually note number 2. And then the other ones are way off at the top and they're glitched graphics. So that one was part that we didn't patch, and it was a lot of effort to make this as is. That we knew we were never going to look at the menu there, so we didn't patch it. The same thing with the learning song interface. It only shows 8 of the notes. We could have messed with that and made it had a more complicated interface, but we just left it. It is what it is. So. This is a good time for me to pause and ask if there are questions about anything we've shown so far.
I don't think there's anything. Mostly they just wanted you to wait outside so we could listen to the amazing Gerudo music. But I think we're...
Too late.
Yeah, I've been
Sorry.
answering things as we've been going along. I don't think there's anything that requires your immediate attention. Just a quick time check. We're at an hour 51 on our clock.
Right. We're doing well so far. I want to give you guys time to keep going for a bit. It sounds like we're heading into some more cool stuff. I've been loving it so far. Why you're not hearing anything from me? Just like, I would just react and I don't want to interrupt.
All right.
I'll continue to answer questions on the side as best I can while Soren continues to talk through the explanation of everything that was put into this, and we'll just keep moving forward. The next part you're going to really like, because this is the running man and you can't go wrong with messing him up.
You're giving me even less to do than usual, so I just get to watch, honestly.
Isn't it enjoyable? Okay, go on, Soren.
Yeah, it's nice. I love having the back and forth. It's wonderful, and typically it's just me and one other guest. But seeing the two of you working together, I'm like, cool. I'm just a viewer at this point. Go for it. I'm just back here if you need me.
Yeah, so he has a lot of talking to do here, so I can, go through this. But yeah, the Running Man, normal race is totally normally in the game. But the thing is, there is no code, there is no dialogue, there is nothing for you beating the Running Man. So even if you use speedrunning strategies and glitches, or you just hack it in an emulator or whatever, you give yourself a time of 0. You show up at the Lost Woods, he'll already be there, and in his dialogue he will say, huff, huff, you did well, but I beat you by 1 second. So the Running Man will always beat you by 1 second, unless you have arbitrary code execution. So we have arbitrary code execution, so we can change Fabric of Reality. We can change, we're actually swapping out the whole Running Man for an alternate Running Man that has a better outcome. So that's a completely vanilla Running Man that you saw there. This is all vanilla so far with the race. And then after we go through this loading zone, we're going through this loading zone first, because otherwise we'll spawn on the other side of the bridge as Young Link, which is a little bit more of a pain in the butt. Whoops, I think I messed that up. All right, so me messing this up is a good point to tell you that another part of the Ocarina system that we didn't actually patch is the checking for the number of notes that it will check in sequence. This is not actually checking whether I play all 18 notes of this. It's only checking the last 8. So I can just play... Right. I can just play that part, and it'll still take it. So we didn't show that
realize
live.
that.
Sorry, what did you say?
I didn't know that.
Yep. So the timer is corrupted. This is sort of legit and sort of not legit. It was our own custom code that set the timer to a negative value since we went back in time. That's our code. That's not anything in the game. But this is legitimately what the game does when the timer is negative. It is trying to draw the numbers. It has a algorithm for drawing 10s and then 1s and everything, and it gets to the 1s and the value is negative. It reads graphics out of bounds. There's actually code to make sure that the timer value stays between. So it started at -90 and it's counting up, and we have code that if it gets above like -15, it'll go back to -30. So this will just actually cycle forever in case we took too long. Again, marathon strats, everything had to be as robust as possible to whatever could possibly happen live. So this, we don't actually only have the 90 seconds, we have an infinite amount of time to go into the future and finish the race. So we're going to the end of the race. Playing the song again, I might as well just start from here.
The irony of being on a show called That's Never Happened Before and telling you we worked ridiculously hard so we would never have to utter the words, well, that's never happened before.
Well, there was a That's Never Happened Before for us live, but that I'll get to that at the very end. So here comes the Running Man. So this is not the same Running Man that we started with. This is a completely custom actor. Well, obviously the 3D model and animations are vanilla, but the code for him is completely custom. This overwrites. So already in the game, the Running Man that you start, the child Running Man and the adult Running Man are different. But we overwrote the version of the Running Man that comes in here at the end of the race. We replaced that with our custom Running Man that finishes the race. So this is custom actor. All of the dialogue is custom. Of course, beating the Running Man was a big urban legend, so we used arbitrary code execution to make that urban legend now real. Again, at GDQ, this was a real cartridge, unmodified ROM, and it was through the magic of arbitrary code execution and manipulating the console's memory that we were able to beat the Running Man, but that's still within the context of the original unmodified game. So, but our completely custom Running Man, who we've now beaten, says he wants to give us a special reward in the middle of the field. The reason we had to do that was that we couldn't fight him on the bridge. We needed some more space. And we wanted an excuse to show another beta item, which is this giant rupee here. I am not good enough to TAS. I've successfully done it a couple of times because it's not super hard, but I'm not going to embarrass myself trying 20 times to do that right now. So I'm just going to walk backwards.
And yes, just to review, we went back in time to Child Link, then we came back into Adult Link.
Right. So we started the race as adult, went back in time 7 years, went to the end of the race, and then went forward in time 7 years. So this giant magenta rupee is a item left on the cartridge, and its real behavior is what you're going to see, except that when it blows up, it only knocks Link over right where he is. I added extra code to knock Link back a great distance and then start the cutscene to start the Running Man battle. So the Running Man boss battle is completely custom code. Some people online were speculating that he has Dark Link code. No. The code for him is released. It's on our GitHub. The actor file is not released because, unfortunately, the way that this was made, when the custom animations were made, they're actually inseparable from the model. So we can't, and the model is Nintendo's copyrighted. So even though the animations are released, and we did release the animation files by themselves, the model is not released, and so you can't actually play with them. But the code is released, the animations themselves are released. Again, we released every single thing we could that was not copyrighted. But that's what we had to do in order to not get it shut down. So so he's tough. He will dodge a lot of things. We don't really have to worry about dying because we have the inventory editor. We just give ourselves more hearts or Nehru's Love or whatever. I can show arrows don't work that well, though I can show one way to cheese him. Actually, I might as well cheese him. So I should also mention, as I pause, you can see there's multiple copies of him. That's not a graphical glitch. This is actually created by the programmer who made the Running Man battle, not me. Rankai Sija made like 90% of his code here. And so, I'm going to cheese him because this is not the real version. So why not? First of all, his AI does not handle walls properly. He doesn't walk through the wall, so it's not like he just completely clips through the wall. But he does not know how to. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to have happen here. I got to walk around. He doesn't know how to plan paths that will intelligently avoid the walls. He just sort of runs into it. So there he is. Then he's going to do that. So I guess that's a pretty good strategy. One of the So I was trying to cheese him against the wall. That didn't seem to work too well. Where is he? He's probably stuck on the wall over here. Again, we coach save state to not try to put the running man in situations that the flaws in the running man's code would be visible. One thing we can do is if we can get a hit on him, which I'm having trouble doing, and save state was better at this. When we hit him with the bow, he gets knocked back directly in a row, in like a straight. I'm just sort of spamming forward here and hoping I can hit him at some point, but it's not working too well for me. I'm not as good at him as save state is, so
this really is that hard, by the way. This is
it's
very,
pretty hard.
very hard fight.
At first we made him not too hard, and then it was like, okay, he wasn't, he was dying in only a few hits. It also depends on what kind of hits you're doing. So if you hit him with whatchamacallit, if you hit him with sorry, I'm a bad multitasker. If you hit him with stabs, crouch stabs like this, that does double damage if you set that up ahead with a jump attack. There we go. Finally got him. Lucky jump attack there.
Woohoo!
Custom animation, custom cutscene, custom dialogue. We originally had a version of this where he falls over at the end. It was really funny, but also looked really bad. It looked like really bad quality. So we, had to get some custom animations in and everything. And he says, "I guess you're a better cheater than I am," which led a lot of people to realize that this was custom content, which we're glad that it had that effect. But yes, here is his backstory. So completely made up backstory. We needed to, find a way to go from the urban legend of Running Man to getting the ability to equip the medallions. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But we also wanted to show why the Running Man could beat us all of these years. So we wrote a backstory for him that he found this object, this golden locket that gave him the ability to run extremely fast, which of course is what he does. And he says he could even run faster than light, which is the excuse for why he could time travel and get to the end of the race before it started, that we were able to do better.
I'm still suspicious of that physics.
It's not real, but that was our, we had to come up with an explanation. So, and it's funny. So
it is hilarious.
There you go. And then, reference to Breath of the Wild here. And of course the redemption arc of person gives up their power and, whatever. So this locket, the Sage's Charm, this is made up, but the power that the Sage's Charm gives us is actual beta content. So that's, and it's not left on the cartridge, but we'll talk about that in a moment. So Sage's Charm, 3D model made by us. The dialogue is made by us. The idea of it doubling the magic meter, again, is made up by us. But the idea of equipping the medallions is not made up by us. And the Running Man runs off into the subset for the final time, end of his arc. It will run for 1,500 units and then despawn. So this is the Sage's Charm. It goes over here. This is actually just a reskinned Stone of Agony, but it has our custom icon there and our custom text here that says Sage's Charm. And we can actually equip it. We can actually equip anything here, but that's not how we're supposed to use it. This is more, behind the scenes thing. But actually what it gives us the ability to is equip the medallions. And I better make sure I unequip those other things, because if I actually use them, the game will crash. So the idea of equipping medallions is actual beta content that was not left on the cartridge, but that was created by Nintendo back in the day. And that was shown in pre-release videos and screenshots and, information like that. And it was also in some of the beta versions of Ocarina of Time that have been leaked. We did not copy any code or any data from the GigaLeak or from the Space World Overdump, which is the other beta version of Ocarina of Time that leaked. And we had most of Triforce Percent planned, if not made, before those happened. But we can still use those in our description as saying that this was, additional evidence. So we see in those versions that you could actually equip the medallions and actually use them. It has the text for them, and it has, other graphics for them. So that is absolutely 100% was made by Nintendo. That was the magic spells. There wasn't a separate Din's Fire, Thoreau's Wind, Nehru's Love. That was just, you would equip the medallions and use the medallions, and they would do those magic functions. And there was another one, there were other ones for the other medallions as well. And you could also equip all of the medallions to arrows and then make elemental arrows of all 6 types. There was like wind arrows and not just light arrows and fire arrows and ice arrows and everything. So yes, that's actually made by Nintendo, and then the mechanics of equipping the medallions was written by me. The code was written by me, and that involves not just it involves patches to rendering the medallions here because they're a different size. This isn't just draw that picture. We had to change it so that it can draw the picture of the correct size, and also the animation of having it fly up there, that's also custom. We had to match the original animation that's used for, equipping other things. We had to make that, work for the medallions as well. And also make all of those things not happen if you don't already have the Sage's Charm. So, oops.
Chad, how are you? Oh, sorry. I was like echoing in my own mic. How are you all holding up, chat? This is super amazing to watch, right?
I should
Just
mention
want to
there,
get a quick check.
you saw Link be squished against the ground. There's actually a mistake in the game. There's a mistake in those 2 cutscenes for Child Link opening the waterfall and Adult Link opening the waterfall. They used the wrong age action for Link in each of those scenes. So Adult Link was just doing the Child Link action for look up at waterfall opening, and Child Link does the Adult Link action for look up at waterfall opening, and that is in the vanilla game. So we didn't patch it because nobody cares about that. So here we are, Ice in Zora's Domain.
I think Fu was about to say something else.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, I think I'm good. You keep going.
Okay.
We will have a sort of a moment we can, if we want to take another break, we'll have a moment in a few minutes that we can stop, if that's what you'd like to do.
Oh, me? You checking with me?
Yeah.
Oh, the game was a little loud over you. Sorry.
Oh, I'm
On my
sorry.
end.
Do you want me to
No,
adjust
you're
that?
I had a little bit of difficulty hearing you.
That is not on you. Yeah, no,
Well,
no worries. Keep it up. It depends on how much do you think you have left to go through with all this? Because I know we have another section of the end, and then you have something you want to talk about after the end of the showcase, right?
Yeah, so we should take a break soonish.
Okay, that sounds
but I guess
great.
after
We're
I show this-
easily 45 minutes away from the end at this rate.
Great,
Yeah.
no problem. Yeah, I mean, keep going for a bit, and once you think it's a good point, you let me know.
All right. So, so the ice melting in Zora's Domain, using the medallion to melt the ice, this is something that was theorized. This was an urban legend. There isn't really, the functionality for this is not left in the game, but the actor that does the ice and the water for Zora's Domain decides between ice and water based on Link's age, but it's making that decision every single frame. So all you would have to do, all the original developers would have had to do to make this be a dynamic change was change the condition from being, is Link child or adult to being, has Link melted the ice yet? Or something, something like that. So it is dynamically picking between the water and the ice in the final game. So we said that is sort of arguable that the developers were intending, because they could have made it where it either at spawn it picks which it's going to be and then just doesn't do anything else, or they could have made it where they're actually, so every scene has different setups for adult and child and for other situations. So they could have just made it that there was just a different actor in the child version and the adult version. That's how most things are in the game. And they didn't do it that way. They had it pick every frame which one to draw. So it's sort of, we're saying that it's sort of arguable, but the actual animation and everything for melting the ice is made by us. And you'll notice these steam particles that are orange at first and fade to white. We had to play with that a lot to try to get it to look right. There's also custom code for changing it to go back to having the light reflecting on the walls in Zora's Domain, which didn't normally happen. I should also mention, we had a bug in the code for fading out the snowflakes, because there's snowflakes in Zora's Domain. And there was a bug in the code, and there's a 1 in 16 chance that it would crash here. And we had only ever crashed once before GDQ, and it was in March. It was months beforehand. And so we didn't know what the bug was. And we played it at GDQ with the bug because we didn't know any better. And it didn't crash. And then weeks later, when Dwango was preparing for another event to show this, it crashed again. We managed to get a stack trace. I found the bug. I realized that it was a 1 in 16 chance of crashing every time we showed it. And we just got lucky live. So yeah, maybe I shouldn't have been talking over that part, but Urban Legend to melt the ice in Zora's domain, that little alcove that we went into, the alcove is there, but it's not actually an exit. We patched it to be an exit. So if you actually cheat your way down there, you can see the alcove, you walk into the alcove, but it doesn't fade to black. It's not an exit. It doesn't take you to the Unicorn Fountain. The Unicorn Fountain here, this is our first completely custom scene.
Sorry, I had to.
Yeah, no Unicorn Fountain. So this is a completely custom scene injected through the controller input. Still the vanilla game, the way we're counting it, but this was beta content that was shown in pre-release videos and screenshots. You can see magazine clippings with this Unicorn Fountain. Actually, if you look closely, Nintendo's unicorns looked a lot more jank than ours did. We really fixed them up and made them look better. The Ocarina of Time does not support overlapping water boxes, so the water in here is actually not real water. Only the water here on the ground is real water, but we figured we wouldn't climb on the statue during the live run. This pedestal of the Ocarina is actual beta item that's actually left on the cartridge. We just had to spawn it in. It's a 3D model. It just has the collision. It doesn't do anything. The Ocarina prompt on top of it is actually a separate actor. Yeah, we just spawn those in. And of course, it's an Ocarina prompt. It's used to, we told it to ask for Zelda's Lullaby. In a moment here, we'll see, this is another custom cutscene. This is actually the first custom cutscene I made. I did most of the custom cutscenes. Dwango and Defena Sam did some of the staff roll cutscenes, but I did pretty much everything else for all the custom cutscenes. And I'll show some of that after on our last segment here of how some of that looked behind the scenes.
And
but
it's not
for now,
trivial either.
Yes, it's not. So this is the Beta Great Fairy. The Beta Great Fairy 3D model is actually left in the cartridge. It does not have any animations. It's very clearly supposed to be a static model. And in the videos, you can see it just as a static model that, hovers, floats up and down like this. So the 3D model is actually on the cartridge, but the scenario, the dialogue, all of that is not on the cartridge.
Huge credit again
of course,
to our writing team.
Yes, credit to our writing team, credit to our scene modeling team for making this look good. Credit to me for programming this part. So the Beta Great Fairy did appear in the Nintendo screenshots in the Unicorn Fountain, but of course the Beta Great Fairy was not teaching Link the Overture of Sages. The Overture of Sages was perhaps the most famous video game urban legend. It was a hoax about Ocarina of Time, about how to get the Triforce, that involves this song, the Overture of Sages, the same button presses that we have here. Our composing team, which was myself and Rebecca Tripp, I arranged this song to match the button presses. So the actual 6-note Ocarina song was composed by the hoaxer in 1999. The person who made up this fake leak composed this, and then I arranged the background music to actually turn it into a real Ocarina song that you could learn. And of course, put it into the game with arbitrary code execution, making this rumor finally true just through millions of button presses. And, so we learned the Overture of Sages, and the Beta Great Fairy instructs us to play this song before the Blade of Destiny, and the path of the sages shall be revealed. So this is a good time for us to take another break. When we come back, we can show the finale of Triforce Percent and show a little bit of behind the scenes, and the chat will get to have a little bit of interaction with that as well.
Yay, it's really cool. If anybody missed it on SGDQ, please stick around and watch this last bit. You just need to get up and walk around. You can get those brains jogging so you can take in the rest of the showcase. It's been so cool. I love watching all of this again. Oh man, you can go back. If anybody missed the beginning of the show today, watch that. But also watch the SGDQ showcase of this, all done at once. It's so cool. It's so fun. This is why I wanted this on the show. I'm like, please bring it back, talk about it more. Alrighty. We'll be back in a few. Don't forget, while we're on break real quick, if you need something quick to do, besides perusing our YouTube channel with other hotfix shows, you can always consider what games you want to submit or volunteer positions you might want to submit for this upcoming AGDQ 2023 online. So consider that. You can go to gamesandquick.com for more info, and we will be right back. Oh, and we are back with the final portion of tonight's episode of That's Never Happened Before. Hi, Kungfufruitcup here, joined by Dwango AC and Soren, who are showing off the so incredibly cool Triforce percent and breaking it down, talking about more about what went into it, how it was coded, programmed, everything about this task. It's been so cool. So I'm going to go ahead and let them take away for the last portion of it. But if you haven't seen the ending, or if you missed it at SGDQ, stick around, be ready to, maybe have your own little bit of involvement. And I'm just going to leave it there. And Dwango, we'll go back to you for the countdown because we've been swapping back and forth. And take it away, you two.
All right. In 3, 2, 1, go.
So I'm going to continue where we left off. We learned the Overture of Sages from the Beta Great Fairy in the Unicorn Fountain here, and the Beta Great Fairy instructed us to play the song in front of the Blade of Destiny, so that's where we're going next. So it's important, for our lore. It doesn't actually matter for the run, but we do not have the Master Sword in our inventory. We have never had the Master Sword in our inventory. We never pulled the Master Sword. We became adult using the full Song of Time, not using the Master Sword. And by the way, here we have to step out into the outer world to show that the world is not destroyed by Ganon. This is actually, we just changed which scene this points to, so it's pointing to the child version of the scene. If we went out into the market, it would be destroyed by Ganon.
And it is horrifying
peek behind
if you make that mistake. Yeah, that we had that happen on another show.
And the reason we actually had to go out there was not just to show that. It was because if we don't reload the Temple of Time, it does not work properly. The Temple of Time is actually a very complex area. It looks like it's completely empty. It is full of stuff, especially in some of the scene setups. Let me just get this right. I didn't get it right. There we go. It is full of stuff. Sheik is there most of the time, and Sheik is running a lot of the cutscenes. It's Sheik's code that handles various pieces of thing. The Master Sword has code that handles things. There's like lighting effects. There's a whole bunch of stuff. So we had to patch a bunch of that stuff to make this scene possible as Adult Link, because there's so much code in the game that just checks, is Link child or adult, for what to do. And so, for example, if you get into this cutscene and you're Adult Link normally without any patches from arbitrary code execution, you'll see the cutscene, but the Door of Time won't open, because the Door of Time, the part of the Door of Time that could open, just exited as soon as it loaded, because you're Adult Link. So the Door of Time, of course, it's already open. So that code just completely doesn't work because it assumes that we're Adult Link. So we had to make all of these patches to various pieces of this code, and we have to make sure the correct version of all of that loads in. And so we have to be in the correct scene setups. We actually have to be walking in. So that's why we had to do that. So these are vanilla cutscenes, but we have a ton of patches in place to allow us to experience these cutscenes as Adult Link. So for example, the Master Sword would not be in the pedestal if we're Adult Link normally. And I would show what happens if we pull the Master Sword, because we actually built this. It actually, for the most part, it actually works correctly, and we can have Adult Link pull the Master Sword. But if I do that, we will get stuck in a bunch of cutscenes and we'll waste like 5 minutes. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do what we did during the run, play the Overture of Sages in front of the Master Sword, as Ariana Almendos, the hoaxer in 1999, told us. So of course, this is all, it's not beta content, it's urban legend content that was made up in a hoax in 1999 and finally real in Ocarina of Time through the magic of arbitrary code execution. At SGDQ, again, this was an unmodified ROM, unmodified cartridge, all of these things were done by modifying the console's memory in real time through controller input by TASBot. So all of that data injected, and it's just sitting there in memory, and we have all of our patches in the operating system that will load things at the appropriate times, all doing all of that. So it's just sort of seamlessly running our new plot now. But this was all created by controller input within the context of the vanilla game without any modifications in advance. So custom cutscene here. Every single stage has a custom cutscene. You'll see this. I'll show this scene behind the scenes later, but this is a bunch of little custom cutscenes, completely custom dialogue. This scene, obviously the Chamber of Sages is in Ocarina of Time, so we took that scene, we imported it into Blender, and we made a bunch of modifications to it. This platform does work if you just spawn into the scene normally, and these side platforms do exist, but they're not in quite this pattern of going up like this. And there are invisible walls around the side platform. Rauru does have collision, but his arms don't have collision, by the way. And these bridges that lead to the side platforms are made up by us. They have some interesting shaders used on them, actually, or graphical effects used on them that are difficult for most emulators to handle. So that's another part that you can't really emulate without sort of advanced emulator settings.
Also, we practiced this a lot to make sure we didn't fall off, because it's annoying.
I should actually fall off and show what happens. So goodbye. So what happens is the first bridge will trigger, despite
but his arms are
the
down.
fact that we didn't talk to Rauru. Sorry?
His arms are down.
Yes, his arms are down. He didn't spawn back in correctly, and we don't have an interface. We've lost our whole GUI, but we're never going to need the GUI for the rest of the run, so that's fine. It still is in part of a cutscene mode. That's what's going on until we go through a proper loading zone. It will be still think partly that we're in a cutscene. But yeah, so every single one of these stages is a custom cutscene stored in this modified scene file. Oh, I just skipped through the rock joke, but Darunia makes a rock joke because he's a Goron and they're rock people. So yes, so this is based on A Link Between Worlds, where you go to the Sacred Realm, the same scene basically. Ruto is thirsty for Link, but who isn't? And you go up these circular stairs to all the side platforms and receive blessings from the stages. So that's what we implemented here. And again, the side platforms are in the vanilla scene, but they aren't in this nice staircase pattern. And of course, there's no staircases that go between them. And the sages are all custom. It's actually one actor that handles all of the sages, and will pull in the right object and draw it and have them do their animation and everything, and because it's basically the same code running for all of them except for Sheik. Sheik has a bit of a different thing, but yeah. So she said Nibiru said she would see us again in a few years when we talked to her earlier, and now here she is. They don't interact again after this, but they do have collision, just in case we had to walk into Rauru, so we need to have them all have collision. Their collision is appropriate to their body size. The size of the cylinder is based on the size of their body, so that's a little tidbit you might not have noticed. So this is in our own canon, made up canon for this. This is our first time meeting each of these stages, except for Nibiru. And Saria, of course, already knew us. So this is, Impa is first introduced and says, oh, you must have been the boy from Princess Zelda's dreams. And she says, we got her Sage's Charm. So the Sage's Charm was supposed to be Impa's in our custom plot that we made here.
Before you go on too far, there's questions about the music.
Oh, yeah. So this music track, I'm sorry, I'm usually hearing this. I have muted in my own audio here. But yes, this music track was arranged by Rebecca Tripp. This is the only song that was not arranged by me. Actually, well, with a caveat you'll hear about in a minute. But yes, this is a custom arrangement based on the original Sage's theme, and then she elaborated it into a more appropriate for climbing the stairs up to the Triforce. Any other things I should address before I walk up onto this platform here?
I think everything else I'm going to save for later.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say a couple things for the end, probably. we could ask.
So there's 6 sages. We already talked to the 6 sages. Here's our 7th platform and our 7th sage. This particular line, I workshopped this with the other writer a bunch. We were, sort of wanted to say the one with the ability to execute arbitrary code, but we thought that would be too spot on, so we just went with bend and shift time itself. But some people realized from this dialogue that this was, custom content. Talking about the timelines. We've known each other in ages past, and surely in other timelines of the present. Our destiny is about to change forever when we get the Triforce. This is trying to make this sound like what Sheik would actually tell Link, but also Sheik sort of knows that something a little bit more than reality is happening here. So, here's our questions. What our burning question that Link could ask Sheik. Since we showed the second one during GDQ, we'll show the first one today. Link is asking Sheik, "Are you Zelda?"
I'm hoping Fu responds.
And of course, this is a reference to the Retro Studios Sheik game that was canceled. Would be nice if Sheik could get their own game someday, but we'll have to wait a bit longer, I guess. I hope it does happen someday.
That was precious.
Let's not keep the GDQ audience waiting from what they've been here to see. And ironically, I was actually surprised by the people reacting to this online. A couple of them definitely understood at this point that we were about to get the Triforce, but there was enough people who didn't understand. I thought we were being really heavy-handed with the symbolism and everything, and everybody would understand what was past this door. But, maybe people weren't as up-to-date on the lore and everything. And, of course, at this moment, I emphasized to everybody that this was an unmodified cartridge, and we hadn't changed anything about the game in advance. All we did was press buttons very fast. And that's true. Millions of button inputs, encoding, large-scale changes to, custom scene, custom dialogue, custom actors, custom everything, but still within the context of the original game. No ROM changes, nothing modified in advance, just arbitrary code execution. And as I go through this loading transition, you will see a Triforce wipe. That is actual beta content left on the cartridge. You just have to set a particular type of scene transition, and it will show the Triforce as the wipe. So here you go. And this scene, the Triforce scene, is not left on the cartridge, but it was created by Nintendo back in the day, shown in a very famous early video, an advertisement for Ocarina of Time. We recreated it. We added the animation of Link reaching and touching the Triforce, and of course the text is custom.
I was amazed that even with it being so on point in this message, that some people still believed that it was in the original cartridge.
I think at this point, even the people were like, no, there's no way that was actually on the original cartridge, right? I think even those people realized that this couldn't have been, because it says 23 years, it's self-referential. It's 23 years is the time between Ocarina of Time releasing and SGDQ, 23 and a half years. Of millions of players around the world. So the dream to get the Triforce and Ocarina of Time was not previously possible until we have arbitrary code execution and we can create the entire scene, the Triforce chest, everything. This scene, we made it as close as we could to the scene that Nintendo created back in the day, as accurate as possible. But it is created by us. It was not left on the cartridge, but arbitrary code execution is left on the cartridge, and we can use that and get this without modifying the game in advance. So that's what we've done. Anything to ask before I move on?
Ah, man, so many great comments about how this impacted people. Fu, anything from your side?
I wanna get to the end before we talk about any follow-ups.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna move on. So, what happens next? Link gets the Triforce. What would Link do with the Triforce? Well, first of all, he has to have a little chat with the goddesses, and the goddesses have to tell him. He doesn't realize at first that he's hearing a voice in his head from the goddesses. We considered having a more elaborate scene for this, but the more elaborate scene is coming next, so we stuck with this for now. Custom cutscenes, I will show this cutscene in behind the scenes. Specifically, this is one of the most interesting ones. This is actually one of the last ones that I made. I was started working on this at the same time as the next scene, but I was proud of the cinematography here.
As you should be.
And the music's also arranged by me. This is the Triforce Chamber music from A Link to the Past, arranged for Ocarina of Time engine. So, I started this whole thing as being a music arranger. I got the opportunity to have my own music arrangements in an unmodified copy of Ocarina of Time in front of hundreds of thousands of audience members. So that was really, part of the special. And there's a lot of special parts of this for me, but that was part of the special part for me. So we get to this choice. This is the only choice in the game that we didn't implement anything for the other options, because to do a completely alternate ending would have been stupid, to spend huge amount of development effort for making something that no one would ever see. And then to put in we could have done some throwaway thing like the goddess is saying, oh, that wasn't the right answer, you should pick a different one. But then that takes away his agency of actually making the choice. So, either we're going to show something alternate or not. One thing that we did consider was doing rupees and having a donation come through from the 3 golden goddesses for some thousands of dollars, and having this be the goddesses gave rupees to Doctors Without Borders. But the problem with that was we would have had to actually come up with the thousands of dollars ourselves, and it wouldn't have been, we each donated hundreds of dollars to Doctors Without Borders at GDQ, but the amount that we would have needed to come up with in order to make that actually impactful would have been at least $5,000, and that's a bit much for me to do. A bit much for me to afford this point in my life. Hopefully someday, but so we didn't do that. We just went with See the Future. But just for the sake of showing off, the game does not check which dialogue option I pick. It just closes the dialogue box and then goes on to the ending, which is only one ending. So I will pick a different option, and you will see that nothing happens. But sorry, it's See the Future. That's what we designed for. So Link requests to see the future. Link is warping in time to the future. We zoom in on the Triforce chest, and then we zoom back out from the Triforce chest. The same place, but tens of thousands of years in the future. The same location in the Sacred Realm is now in the sky. It's, way back when it wasn't really clear if the Sacred Realm was different from the sky. Well, that's a lot of lore. I won't get into that now. But anyway, this is the Sacred Realm in the future, and Link is warping back in. And tens of thousands of years in the future, this is what Link looks like. So this is not a video. This is the N64. This is injected code, injected models, injected patches to the RSP microcode that allow us to do cell shading. This is, that was thought to not be possible on the N64 to do cell shading. It was thought not to be possible to do high poly models. The animations on their clothing and hair are being computed live. They're not like pre-baked animations. It was actually smaller size to not inject all of the hair animations and everything and have them actually simulated. So physics simulation, voice acting.
I'm so happy to see this. I know they're out there, but it would be nice if we could see them, don't you think?
All right, chat. Fu, is this a slow mode or sub only chat, or can anyone participate?
I know for the main events, I believe it's an anybody can participate chat.
All right, folks. Well, I think you guys know what to do now. Everyone, it's time. Type here together in the chat or explore the emotes that are available to you.
Yeah, we actually support most of the a lot of the GDQ emotes, not all of them. The ones that are like sort of positive in tone, and some Twitch emotes. So we'll leave it here.
I think they're going. Yeah.
Okay, I should press A?
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Look!
Oh.
So yes, these are live. These are actually being captured right now. This was not pre-computed. You will, hopefully you will see your name. Some of them are showing up off screen, so you might not see your name, but this is actually real. The replay device we have scripts on the computer. They're reading Twitch API, grabbing chat messages, encoding them, sending them to the replay device. The replay device encodes them into controller input, sends it to the console. The console decodes it back into messages and renders them on screen.
To see our future.
You should shut up there for a moment. Renders them on screen like the way sort of like how a web browser does. It's actually drawing the text properly. I should mention the voice actors are not the Nintendo voice actors. There are other professional voice actors that we got onto the project, but not the actual voice actors from Nintendo. But they did a very good job, and thank you for being here together with us. And we actually have a little surprise after this scene for the next segment here. But I'll let this play out here.
Listen carefully.
ゼルダ姫、ありがとう。一緒に未来を作りましょうか。
So, Link finally speaks in the Zelda game. Breath of the Wild Link speaks in Ocarina of Time, and we were actually expecting that to happen. Some usernames there, but here we are. You'll hear some new music. This is the TASBot theme,
Oh.
which we have added just for today. And I will talk a little bit more about the music after it's done, but I want to let it play out for everybody.
Please enjoy. This was originally composed by Whimsy Heath and John Gabriel UK, and adapted by Soren.
So actually, while it's playing, I will mention a couple of things. First of all, the staff role is also totally custom cutscenes made by us and injected into the game with arbitrary code execution, just like everything else. This wasn't just a video we switched to. This is all in-engine. The music that you're hearing, this is the theme of TASBot. This is playing in the Ocarina of Time engine. You may not have realized, but Ocarina of Time and all of the first-party Nintendo 64 games, part of their sound engine is actually a chiptune engine. They have a system for playing these chiptune waveforms, and that is used for some sound effects, like the Zelda chime, but not used in any music. So I specifically arranged this for that system, which is basically not completely unused, but most people are not using that for music.
Pyramid in the background there, by the way.
And shout outs to GDQ Hotfix for having us on today.
Oh.
Just for you.
That's so cool.
So
I'm
it's a
so
little less
emotional.
impactful of an ending without the bombastic orchestral music, but we wanted to give an opportunity to show off another not fully unused, sort of partially used, but mostly unknown aspect of Ocarina of Time is this whole chiptune synthesis engine. So we wanted to present something, and the audio, the music track was not a perfect arrangement for this. I will admit that. There were some issues. Actually, I ran into a bug with the noise channel. It seems like Nintendo didn't really test it, and it had some problems, and it sometimes crashes the RSP. So I had to cut the noise-based instruments, the hi-hats and stuff. So this is not my finest work, but I did want to show that off today. So we are at the end, the Triforce in the Sacred Realm in Ocarina of Time, the ending that many of us wish that we could have had. And now we have created for ourselves through the magic of arbitrary code execution and a lot of engineering and a lot of asset creation and partners work with our partners. And more than 25 people contributed to this Triforce Percent over the last 2.5 years. And it has been a privilege to be, participate in this and direct this project.
Yeah, that's not even the end of it, though. We still have more to show you.
Yeah, I was like, what else do we... I know we have a little follow-up thing.
I just want to show a little behind the scenes because I think people are going to be interested.
Yeah, well, he's setting that up, and Ray, they're moving things over for the scene to get it all cropped correctly. Just a quick couple of things. I was so blessed to be able to be a part of this. I didn't have any idea how big it was when Soren approached me and said, hey, I have this cool thing I want to do. I had no idea what I was in for at the time. I also had no idea at the beginning exactly how much effort went into making this and how it was done. And you guys are about to see for the first time. I don't think very many people have seen this other than one other YouTube video. You're going to see how this was done and what effort went into making this.
Yeah, I'm not going to go over all of the code and all of the scenes and everything. I want to show a couple of, small snippets of things. And yeah, you can see a little bit more of this. I did an interview with HMK, who is one of our partner reactors. He did a separate interview with me where I went over some of this. But I just want to show some of the stuff behind the scenes, a few scenes, some visual stuff. Most people aren't going to care about code of looking at it, but the code is... all of the code that we wrote is released, so you can just go on GitHub and download it however you like. So this is the Triforce Room scene. This is how it looks to make custom scenes in Blender for Ocarina of Time. There's a plugin called Fast64 and a plugin called Zcam Edit. There are probably like 10 people who have made major contributions and many people who have made minor contributions to Fast64, and Zcam Edit was written by me. And I actually wrote it because the existing tools for creating cutscenes in Ocarina of Time were pretty difficult to work with. So this is, I made this as a replacement. So, for example, this is the cutscene when Link hits the Triforce. You will see let me restart this. On the left is the scene, and on the right is the view from the camera, which is flying around. And let me select the camera if I can find it here. Here, no, that's Link. Where did it go? Here it is. So this is the camera, and you'll see the camera flying around on the left. These black things, which turn orange when I select them, these are representing the camera motion. So for example, this one is representing how the camera swings around from starting on the left side and swings around and climbs up like this. So the process of creating the cutscene is like editing these and moving them around and like previewing it and looking on the right and seeing how it looks and, playing with it until it looks good. So, this is the Triforce scene in Blender. And you can't hear it. This is just on my local computer, but I have the music. So it's playing the music to me, and I edited the scene to adjust to, match the timing of the music. And I have to just guess what it looks like when Link is like, this is Link, this arrow, this is Link. He walks in, climbs up the stairs. I have to sort of guess what it will look like when he's in front of the, in front of the Triforce chest and everything. And you can actually see if I zoom in here, there's like a bunch of stuff here at the origin. This says that there's the Triforce chest, there's the Triforce pieces themselves. So there's 3 separate instances of the same actor for the 3 Triforce pieces, which have some programmatic animation that will go through and rotate around and everything. That was actually, I could have done the animations as like properly animated, but that was back at a time when we didn't really know how we were going to do everything in the project, and we thought we might have only a few dozen kilobytes of code that we could inject, and so everything had to be really small. So the Triforce, it's programs that run the animation. It doesn't have the animations pre-baked. It's like generating them. And so it's only like a few hundred bytes of code, a few hundred bytes for the Triforce behavior because it was created that way. But anyway, this goes through He gets the Triforce, and then this is the scene for, he walks down, he's hearing the goddesses. And when we want to put in text boxes and stuff, I select the cutscene, then I go in here. This is like editing the cutscene. I have text box list, and then I have all of these different, text box message ID, and it comes up at this frame, it exits at this frame. And then what those look like is here. So this is what some of the messages look like. And let me just stop my Blender for a second. Blender. Oh, I lost it. Oh, well. This is what the messages look like. So, it is we, the golden goddesses, unskippable everywhere, changing color, text speed, and everything. What do you wish for? 3 choices, that kind of stuff. And here in the scene, I also want to mention the message ID for the text that says you got the Triforce is hex ACE.
That's perfect.
Teehee.
Here it is. You got the Triforce after, you got the color yellow, Triforce color white, quick text disable new line after 23 years, So that's how this works, when we want to make things like this. Chic dialogue and everything. And the whole thing is in here. So we had to inject this also. This is part of that statically linked data that I talked about before. So let me just talk about show a couple of quick scenes here. So this is Link. This is Breath of the Wild Link. This was mostly made by Ali1234. Took the actual model from Breath of the Wild and then put it through a bunch of programmatic reductions in like poly count, mesh simplifications, and then did a bunch of extra ones by hand and redid the textures by hand, or sort of fix them up by hand. And then I rigged Link. I created the armature, and he has no bones in his hands. So there's this is his lower arm. It just that's all. There's no bones in the hands or the fingers, but he has 6 bones in his hair because the hair is important. We have these ones that move around. We have these that move like multiple parts, so they can just wiggle in the wind and look realistic. The ponytail, 6 bones in the tunic to move each part of it so that they just rotate. So that it looks realistic with the physics. And then we have his animation. So the animations were done by several people. They're in the credits, but here's Link speaking. Zelda hime arigato, and then Isho ni mirai wo tsukurimashou ka. And I'm sure you folks in the chat can correct my Japanese pronunciation. I don't speak Japanese. I just memorize those 2 lines. So yeah, we had to, I did the lip flaps. I created his lip flaps for all of the lines. And so, listening to this over and over and animating the rotation of these corners of his mouth and everything. And then you can also see the hair is dynamic. The hair does not move. The animation just has the hair just stuck there. So that's calculated on the fly. The code for the hair physics is released. So you can use that in your own ROM hacks if you want. And I'll also show the, ending. So this might not fully work, but this should load in a moment. Most of the textures, I think. Did I mess something up? Textures won't load. Should load the textures. Yeah, there they go. Sorry about the delay there. So this scene actually has references to the Breath of the Wild Link and Zelda. Sorry, this is taking so long to load. I'm not actually sure what's happening with that. I have a pretty fast
streaming
computer,
at the same time.
Right. There's a lot going on.
I have a lot of cores. It should be fine. But anyway, so it has references to the other scenes. So Breath of the Wild. It's compiling shaders. That's what it's doing. So Breath of the Wild, Link and Zelda can be in the scene, but they're not actually properly. They'll just slide around. So here's the cutscene. Camera comes in, goes up Link's body, goes around, and then he just slides forward. So that's, it tells him to change to, forward walk mid-pace action, and then slide him around to there. And then, Zelda comes in and changes her to from invisible to visible, and then descends. And yeah, this was, there's a lot of effort put into getting all of these shots just perfect. I must have 100 times gone back and, tweaked a camera position and then watched the ending again. And, this happens in any production. This isn't like me. This is how you make games. So, that's what we had to do. Here's the, camera goes out into the sky for the Twitch messages. Zelda says, "You asked to see our future. Here it is," gesturing at the audience. And then, Link's dialogue, and then that's that. So, Twitch messages, you can see, is an actor out here in the sky that is rendering the messages. We have injected all of the Twitch emotes and all the Twitch badges and everything, and it parses what it gets from the Twitch API and sends that over controller input. And so I think this is all I wanted to show for behind the scenes in terms of some quick things. If people have specific questions, I can show other things.
There's a specific question about the choice to have Link talk. There are a couple folks who are curious why you did that.
Yeah, so why we had him speak at all? It was, we wanted this to be a message among, many other things that this project represented. But, one of the things was giving the message, the community is the future, so let us create the future together. That was our take-home message. So we actually had the characters that the fans care about speak that message to them. And in case they missed it, then I repeated it at the end of the staff roll speech. Because if you hear something twice, you might get it more. So that's why we have him speak, is to deliver the message. Let us create the future together, constructively. The fans, all of the things that fans can do constructively to make The Legend of Zelda greater, whether it's just playing or tweeting about Zelda or making videos or making custom whatever, art or music arrangements or whatever, or, custom stuff like Triforce Percent, all of those things, in our belief, add to the value of The Legend of Zelda or any IP, in the, the value that holds in the world. And, will increase the number of people who buy Tears of the Kingdom. So, we believe that this is, deeply constructive. Not just, this is beyond transformative art. This is, making people's emotional, giving people an emotionally fulfilling experience in a way that really can't, be done in any other way. So, that's what it all comes down to. If you're asking why did Link speak Japanese specifically, that's a more complicated question. Part of it is just that I don't want to hear him speak English. I'd rather have that one degree of separation there. But also in Japanese Breath of the Wild, Link actually speaks in first person, not on screen, but like in his diary entries. All of the quest logs and everything are diary entries from first person of I did this, I experienced this. And, the Japanese audience, it seems, is more willing to accept Link being a character on his own rather than just being the player's avatar. So, Link is not a mute character. Link just doesn't speak on screen. Even in Breath of the Wild, Zelda repeats a line that Link told her off camera. She repeats it on camera. She says, "You told me this something about always take the time to care for your horse," whatever it is. That is something that Link spoke to her, and that didn't happen on camera. So, Link can speak, and it's just, we're not saying that we think Link should talk all the time in future Zelda games. It makes sense as an artistic decision. But also, Mario says at the end of the game, he says, "Thank you so much for playing in my game." So, and Mario doesn't talk all the time. I'm not even saying that we think Link should do that in real games, but Also, I think that this was, I thought that this was done in a tasteful way, but it seems like the community has felt that this was done in a tasteful way, and that was, an appropriate message to have Link speak for.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. There's all kinds of questions, but most of them are from things that we should talk about. How do I say this? Like, there are things that we should have people go back to the beginning of the video and watch questions like, how did we get it transferred? How long did it take? It took us about 7 minutes. So I'm going to post.
It took 2.5 years, and then it took 7 minutes. Yes.
Yeah, it took 7 minutes to make. Well, and it was more like 2.5 years to make 1 hour of content that we sent through TASBot in 7 minutes.
Yes,
right.
That's a good way to put it.
And also for general, I know this probably is not the last line here, but for any more questions, gettriforce.link is our website. We have an FAQ that has a lot of things explained. It has the full list of what things were left on the cartridge, what things were beta content that was not on the cartridge that we remade, and what things we completely made up. That's the list is there on the website. A lot of resources. There's a link to the source. There's all the code that we created, that we released. There's a link there. There's a link to all of our partners' videos. Please check them out. The Swanky Box video is at like 1.2 million views, so we're very thankful about that.
Wow.
Other questions?
Okay. I mean, there was like things throughout, like asking about more of the music. It says, what was the data transfer rate?
It was 5,400
okay.
bytes per second
Yeah,
once we get to the hyperspeed loader, which is roughly a dial-up kind of connection speed. And maybe a lot of the viewers won't know what dial-up is, but it's enough. So out of all of that data that we had to transfer, about a third of it was the voice acting, and about a third of it was the Breath of the Wild, Link and Zelda models and animations.
Wow.
And then a third of it was all the other stuff for the run.
It's wild. I mean, it makes sense when you think about it in the right way. It's still pretty wild to think about. I do have kind of a personal, like a question that I was thinking of, based on another person's question. It's basically just, do you have anything else in mind that you would want to work on? I mean, not even necessarily at this scale. Dwayne, I know that you're always involved in the TAS community, so I guess this is a bit more geared towards Soren. Because of your dedication to Ocarina of Time specifically. Is there anything else like in the Zelda sphere, or just anything in general that you're like, I've always wanted to see this or do this? Or
that is a great question. I will try to keep the answer short because we're pretty over time. But yes, Dwango is going to be doing tons of other stuff. I may contribute to some of that in the future. But yeah, I did this for my love of Ocarina of Time and for a number of things like that. The short answer is there's never going to be anything else like this. There is no other game that has this level of sort of urban legends that we could make real. Majora's Mask is a candidate because not only is there all of the Link is dead theory stuff, but there's also the Ben drowned urban legend. And I've thought about that. I won't be able to I'm not sure if I will ever do that. I certainly won't be able to do that in the next coming, months in my life. But all of the same arbitrary code execution exploit works exactly the same way in Majora's Mask. Obviously, a lot of details will have to change with the code and things, but the same principles all completely work the same way in Majora's Mask. So it's all possible the same way that we did things here. It's all possible to do that in Majora's Mask. So maybe, but no guarantees. It depends on what happens later in my life. This was a 2.5 year investment. This was partly because of COVID and partly because I've been in grad school that I've been able to do this. I'm just finishing up with grad school and going out into work in the next coming months. And so it will depend on what I'm actually doing in the real world. But yeah, that's one idea. There's other ideas. I thought about doing Ocarina of Time Triforce % RTA version. So no TASBot. And there would be some changes to how we do the setup, because we basically have to use arbitrary code execution to give ourselves the ability to have a human start editing memory and go through some... There's sort of a way to do this. And then just have the speedrunner sit there with a hex editor, basically have them put in a hex editor, and then sit there with a hex editor for hours, just typing in data, probably just for the Triforce scene, and just like typing it all in by hand on the screen. And then after that's done, just, press a button and warp to it. And then it's, no taskbot, really a person just walked up to the console and did this. Not that I love taskbot, but, some people want to see that kind of thing. But that's not necessarily the most interesting to watch, because it's just going to be somebody with a hex, once they do all the setups, just, something like that. So maybe something like that in the future. I'm hoping that other people will be inspired and take our code and do other interesting things with it, but we'll see.
Awesome. Okay, well then leading kind of from this, first of all, thank you all so much again. This is amazing. And leading into more of, like, I was going to kind of ask a follow-up with Dwango about any hints for stuff upcoming. That kind of makes me think of just, let's plug anything that you want to do. I know you're not super present, like you don't stream Soren and don't use Twitter. Is there any kind of platform or anything you'd like people to follow you on, or was that just kind of like, oh, go check out TAS stuff? Or...
Yeah, so gettriforce.link is our website for this project. Follow the TASBot community if you're interested in things that they're doing. As far as me personally, I have a YouTube, but I'm not like a YouTuber. I'm not uploading things constantly. YouTube.com/Soren. If you can spell my name, you can find me on everything. I'm the same name everywhere. But yeah, I'm not like a YouTuber. I don't have a content creation presence.
Right.
I guess if you're a coder, you can follow my GitHub. There will be more, N64 nonsense and other stuff. But that's me.
Awesome. And then, okay, so then over to you, Dwango. So tell us what's going on. Like, whatever you're comfortable sharing, what you're working on, or just even like a little nugget of something, or just where we can find you and the other TAS things that you'd like to share.
Sure, but should I talk about the impact this had before or after I do that? I think after.
Either way.
Okay, I'll talk about that after. So what's coming up next? Space. Definitely space. Maybe not right away, but space. If you guys are interested in helping out,
Dwango means literally outer space, like the stars in the sky.
Yes.
Oh.
Like literally.
Literally.
Oh.
Okay, I'm going to look straight to the camera and say this. Hi, we're all pretty crazy. We all have completely different wild skill sets. We need some help with some folks that can do a little bit of reverse engineering, because we want to take the Satellaview, and it was a satellite service in Japan, and we want to use a derelict satellite still in space that still responds, and with help from NASA, we want to hack a video game console from space. We have a lot more to do.
Okay.
So this is more like an AGDQ 2025 thing, but I'm not kidding. We want to hack a Super Nintendo, or technically a Super Famicom, from space, and then do something cool with it. So that's going to take some effort, so please swing by discord.gg/TASBot. Highly recommend just coming on over to the discord.gg/TASBot community in general. It's an amazing place. So the space thing is just one project, and if you all go flying into our main Hangout channel and start talking about space, everyone's going to be very confused. Like, what are you doing here? Why are you talking about this? So that's one thing. But that's not the only thing we're up to, and I don't want to spoil it. But we need to do something that involves live audience participation. So unfortunately, AGDQ 2023 is probably not that platform, but hold tight for SGDQ 2023. We have some stuff in play. I will just say that it involves blending TASBot, which is classically more like a player piano, with virtual intelligence to completely destroy even professional players of a particular game. It's pretty amazing stuff, and it happens on a real console. We still have work that we need to do there, so if you have any interest in a virtual intelligence type stuff or that kind of aspect, swing on in. Now, if you don't have any experience with any of this, like, why on earth would I have anything to do with this community? Well, the answer is it took a lot of different skill sets to do what we did during the Triforce Percent Ace Showcase. And just because you might think, I don't have any skills in the right area, doesn't mean that you can't be of use. We needed everything from writers to people just to learn Blender. My own son had no experience with a lot of this stuff, and he hopped in and we learned how to do it. We made the end cutscenes. Not all of them. We split them about third and third. But my own son did a substantial number of the end cutscenes and started from nothing. So please come join our community. We're an amazingly friendly, welcoming, open, inclusive, equal community, and we help each other learn new skills and do amazing things. So that's the kind of things that we might be up to next.
Awesome.
But there's the impact of what Ocarina of Time Ace or showcase the Triforce Percent showcase had that I want to touch on.
Sure.
I can't put into words exactly how moving this was, and not just the money that was raised for charity. This was by far the biggest thing we ever did. We had the wonderful pleasure of being set with a $225,000 donation incentive that was met handily. I know that it might look tight, but there was still plenty of room to go. You guys in the audience that were donating for that, thank you. You didn't slow down, and you could have easily hit 250. On top of that, we did the shirt that Soren is wearing right now, the official Triforce Percent TASBot shirt. By the way, we had this available all week with TASBot, with the Triforce right there, really hoping no one would put the two together. Because we had to have it was so...
I think one person figured it out from the shirt, but they fortunately didn't go on Twitter and post about it. So we were good.
So this was a collaboration with the Yeti, yet another of amazing string of collaborations that we did. The Yeti let me know that over 2,800 shirts were sold, and that meant that with $5 of every shirt going to charity, that was another $14,000 right there that went to Doctors Without Borders. The impact from a monetary perspective that this had was astounding. This pushed the TASBot community to over $1.3 million that we've helped raise at just Games Done Quick events over the last few years from 2013 to today. And I couldn't be more proud. And it's not just... Yes, it's awesome that TASBot stuff and my name in the list of runners is now the most runs of anyone. That's cool, but that's just a humble brag. The real impact isn't, we have more runs than anybody else. The real impact is $1.3 million in just TASBot content toward Doctors Without Borders and the Prevent Cancer Foundation. These are organizations that are having real impact in today's world, and to be able to lead something of that magnitude has been absolutely incredible and beyond anything I could have ever imagined, and more specifically, is way beyond anything that I could have done on my own. The reason we're able to do this is because of people that come into the community to help out. Beyond the monetary aspect that went to charity, there's also the heart issue, and Soren's going to have some things to say about this too as well from kind of a karma perspective, but I can't say enough how moving this was. We had 2.5 years of a pandemic that pulled us apart, and we had an opportunity for everyone in the audience, from everyone at home, to come here together. It just tore down all of these walls, and it brought so much more emotion into this event, to the point that when I rewatched the finale of AGDQ 2022, so many people at the end were still saying "here together" in chat 2 days later. It was incredible the impact this had emotionally on the community, and it was the relief we needed. It was all of us being separated for so long by this pandemic, and suddenly an opportunity presents itself where we can come together. And boy, did we come together. We broke Twitch chat. It was not displaying on screen right even. The impact was palpable. And I was supposed to sit there and not say anything and just look at the camera and somewhat smile and not do anything. And I just was overwhelmed with emotion. I couldn't hold it in. You can see me just going, yes. It would just hit me so hard. And everyone in the room, if you were there, you can vouch for this. It was so emotional in the room too. There were people crying in the audience. And even people who have watched this video on YouTube after the fact have reported the same feeling. I don't know if we can ever replicate that. This is probably our magnum opus. I don't see a way to do what we did again for all of the reasons that Soren pointed out, and just this perfect storm of the opportunities we had. But I'm never going to forget this moment. This was amazing. So for everyone who helped, for everyone who helped in the audience and the viewers who came together to say that they were here together with us. Thank you. Genuinely, thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, and that was a good way to end. I don't want to take too long on this, but just to say, people, because of the way Ocarina of Time had all of this content that pointed outside itself, these little bits of beta content, all of the urban legends and everything, many people's experience of the game was that there was always more to it than they could ever access. Whether some of that was real and some of that was not, that was always part of what Ocarina of Time meant to people. And so people have this attachment to the game where it's not a bad kind of attachment, it's a good kind of attachment, but it's still an attachment. It's still looking back and saying like, gee, I really wish that there was more to this. I wish I could get the Triforce. I wish I could beat the Running Man. I wish that those beta elements had a place. I wish that, I could get to finally see what the Unicorn Fountain was like or whatever. And we made all of that come true. And I would like to think, some people don't think that this is any different than a ROM hack because, this content wasn't created by the original developers. And in some ways that's true. But in some ways, arbitrary code execution makes it real in a sense that still has some meaning to it. This is really just you're playing the game in a very specific technical way and managing to make things real. And we had that power, and we decided to use it for a very constructive way. So we resolved this attachments for people, and people thanked us for that. And then after all of their Triforce dreams had come true, we hit them with Here Together and Breath of the Wild content and the Breath of the Wild characters reacting to them. We put the Twitch chat, we put the viewers into Ocarina of Time, just like we put all this other custom content. We actually put you into the game as the finale, and we have Breath of the Wild, Link, and Zelda enjoy, respect and give their respect to you. So that is what we offered, and that had the emotional impact that we were looking for it to have. Making people get in touch with their emotional side be able to sort of safely feel these things and cry it's an honor to have the opportunity to give that experience to people. So this went as well as I could have hoped it did at GDQ, and thank you to you and on behalf of the whole GDQ staff for accepting our run, putting up with our weird requests about, we need an Ethernet cable or whatever, and helping us make this all possible.
Thank you.
Awesome. Wow. Oh my goodness. Okay. All right, you two. I just want to say thank you so much again for being on the show and for helping explain more to us, breaking down more for us. We are a little over time, but you know what? It was a really wonderful time. I mean, it was great. You got through everything you wanted to get through. I mean, to an extent. There's always more, right? There's always something you can still talk about, but this was really amazing. And for anybody who's jumping in toward the end of the show tonight, as we are getting ready to head out for the evening, please go back and watch the rest of the show. It'll be up on the YouTube channel shortly. You all need to check it out. It was so good. So just a huge thank you to our guests this evening, Dwango AC and Soren. You can check out the Triforce % TAS that happened during this past SGDQ, also up on the Games Done Quick YouTube channel. So super easy to find. I mean, I'm sure you can just go in YouTube and search Triforce % and it'll come up. So yes. I'm sure. So definitely check that out. As we're heading out this evening, oh my gosh, I'm doing K-pop love for you all because Here Together, or just, I don't know, either way, it makes me so emotional. I'm just going to read off some things that are coming up so that, I don't break down. I was really trying hard not to cry during the Here Together in chat again, even though I've already seen it before. Anyway,
we don't have a problem with you crying on your show.
It's no problem to be not okay.
But that's up to you.
That's fair. Okay, all right. So anyway, just as a reminder, AGDQ 2023 Online is coming up So excited for that. It's going to be great. January 8th to the 15th, right? Yeah, 8th to the 15th. So submissions are still open for games and volunteers. Game submissions are open through September 21st. Volunteer submissions are open through September 24th. So get those applications in, submissions in if you are interested in that. I know I will be. Then we have the Fright Fatale, which is going to be awesome. That's the one-day event on October 23rd to celebrate the spooky season, brought to you by the Flame Fatale community. And then we have Latin History Month coming up, starting at 4 p.m. Eastern on September 24th, September 25th. That is this coming weekend. Tune in for a variety of runs from Hispanic runners. There's so many cool little things that GDQ is doing like this. So yeah, and I've talked about the YouTube plenty, but just want to say a huge thank you, especially if you all saw our decision to bring GDQ online for safety and security of everybody as we undergo some changes, maybe changes in location. I mean, it's not my decision. I just want to say thank you all to those who are supporting with supporting our hotfix content and supporting Games Done Quick with all of your subs and bits cheered and all of that. So really appreciate that, everyone. And thank you for being here this evening. This was a awesome showcase and a super special episode of That's Never Happened Before. So yeah, tune in for the next episode. Wonderful to have you, and we will see you all next time. Have a great evening.